It was a rainy evening in New York City, the kind of downpour that blurred the skyline and made the lights of the bustling city appear like distant stars. Chloe Summers, a 21-year-old university student, rushed down the street, her boots splashing through puddles as she shielded herself under a small, worn-out umbrella. Her mind was elsewhere, racing between thoughts of her upcoming final exams and the part-time job she held at a local bookstore. She never imagined that this night would mark the beginning of something that would change her life forever. As Chloe dashed through the crowded streets of Manhattan, she found herself in front of an upscale restaurant where the glowing sign read, La Maison. The sight of it made her pause for a moment. This was not a place she would ever dream of stepping into. It was a world away from her reality. Yet, fate had a different plan. Inside, Alex Graham, the powerful and charismatic CEO of Graham Enterprises, sat at a private table in the back, his eyes scanning the luxurious room as he pretended to listen to his business partner drone on about potential acquisitions. Alex was in his mid-30s, a man who had built an empire from the ground up, known for his ruthless business tactics and his seemingly impenetrable heart. His tailored suit fit him perfectly, exuding wealth and control. But that night, even Alex felt the weight of his world. The corporate battles, endless meetings, and pressure to maintain his empire were wearing him down, though he would never admit it. As he gazed through the window, he saw her, Chloe, drenched from the rain, looking lost and out of place. There was something about her that caught his attention. It wasn't her appearance, though she was undoubtedly beautiful, but something deeper, a spark of innocence, perhaps, or a reminder of the simpler life he had long left behind. Without realizing it, Alex found himself standing up, his business partner's words fading into the background. At the same time, Chloe, noticing her umbrella was leaking and no longer offering much protection, decided to step inside the restaurant just for a moment, hoping to escape the storm. The warmth of the place immediately surrounded her, contrasting with the cold wetness clinging to her skin. She glanced around nervously, knowing she didn't belong in a place like this. That's when Alex approached her, his dark eyes filled with curiosity. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice smooth yet commanding. It wasn't the kind of question Chloe expected from a stranger, especially not someone who looked like him. Confident, wealthy, untouchable. Chloe blinked, momentarily stunned by his presence. "I'm fine. Just trying to escape the rain," she replied, her voice soft but clear. There was a pause, a moment where their worlds collided, two people from completely different backgrounds standing face to face. Chloe felt a strange sensation, as if the ground beneath her had shifted. Alex, too, was taken aback by the simplicity of the encounter. He couldn't remember the last time he had spoken to someone who wasn't trying to impress him or gain something from him. "Why don't you join me for a drink?" Alex offered, surprising even himself with the suggestion. Chloe hesitated. She didn't know this man, but there was something about his offer, something she couldn't quite put her finger on. Perhaps it was the warmth in his eyes or the way he seemed so unlike anyone else in the room, despite his obvious wealth. Against her better judgment, she found herself nodding. "All right," she said, her voice barely audible over the noise of the restaurant. They sat at his private table, and from the moment Chloe took her seat, the conversation flowed effortlessly. What began as small talk about the weather quickly turned into a deeper exchange. Chloe spoke about her studies, her passion for literature, and her dreams of becoming a writer one day. Alex listened intently, something he rarely did with anyone. He found himself intrigued by her world, a world free from the complications and cynicism of his own. "Why are you in business?" Chloe asked him at one point, her curiosity getting the best of her. Alex smiled, a hint of sadness behind his eyes. "Because it's what I'm good at," he replied simply, though he knew it was far from the whole truth. As the night wore on, the rain outside continued to fall, but inside, time seemed to stand still. Chloe couldn't remember the last time she felt so comfortable talking to someone, let alone someone like Alex. And for Alex, it was a rare experience to connect with someone who didn't care about his power or money. The evening ended with Alex insisting on giving Chloe a ride home in his sleek black car. Despite her protests, Chloe eventually agreed, realizing that arguing with him was futile. The ride through the rain-soaked streets of New York was quiet, both of them lost in thought. When they arrived at Chloe's modest apartment, she thanked him, unsure if she would ever see him again. But as she stepped out of the car, Alex found himself saying, "I'd like to see you again." Chloe turned to him, surprised. Why? Alex didn't have an answer, not one that made sense anyway. He just knew that he wasn't ready to say goodbye to her just yet. "Because I'd like to," he said, his voice soft but firm. Chloe studied him for a moment before nodding. "All right," she said, her heart racing as she closed the door behind her and disappeared into the night. As Alex's car drove away, Chloe stood on the sidewalk, watching the taillights vanish into the distance. She couldn't explain it, but she knew that her life had just taken an unexpected turn, one that would lead her down a path she could never have predicted. And so, their brief yet intense romance began, a whirlwind affair that neither of them saw coming, but one that would leave lasting scars on both their lives. The romance between Alex and Chloe unfolded quickly, like a fleeting dream. For weeks, they met in secret, dining in secluded corners of restaurants or walking through quiet parks late at night, hidden from the world. Their connection was intense, driven by a chemistry neither of them fully understood. Chloe had never experienced anything like it, a relationship with someone so powerful, so far removed from her life. But as thrilling as it was, deep down she knew this wasn't meant to last. Alex was everything Chloe wasn't. He was established, wealthy, and lived in a world governed by business deals and high stakes. Chloe, on the other hand, was still finding her place in the world, balancing her university studies with part-time work just to make ends meet. And yet, something about Alex drew her in, as if she were caught in the gravitational pull of a star too bright to ignore. But after only a few months, Chloe started to feel different, tired, queasy in the mornings, and unusually emotional. She dismissed it at first, attributing it to the stress of finals and her hectic life. But as the days passed, the signs became too clear to ignore. One evening, after another wave of nausea, Chloe decided to take a pregnancy test. She sat alone in her small apartment, the sound of rain tapping against the window, her heart racing as she waited for the results. 2 lines appeared on the stick, positive. Her world froze. Chloe stared at the test, disbelief and fear flooding her mind. Pregnant. How could this be happening? She was only 21, still in school, still trying to figure out her life. And now, a baby. The reality of the situation hit her like a tidal wave. Alex, what would he say? Would he even care? Their relationship had always felt like it existed in some other realm, outside of real life. But this was as real as it got. For days, Chloe avoided telling him. She debated whether to even say anything at all. Part of her wanted to keep it a secret, to deal with it on her own, but deep down, she knew Alex deserved to know. He was the father, after all. Finally, she summoned the courage to confront him. They met at his penthouse, a place that always felt too extravagant for her, a reminder of the vast difference in their worlds. Chloe sat nervously on the edge of a leather couch, the city lights twinkling outside the floor-to-ceiling windows. Alex poured them both a glass of wine, completely unaware of what was about to unfold. "I need to talk to you about something," Chloe began, her voice shaky but determined. Alex glanced at her, sensing the tension. He set his glass down, his sharp eyes focusing on her. "What is it?" Chloe took a deep breath, her heart pounding. "I'm pregnant." The room went silent. Alex's expression shifted from surprise to something colder, something that made Chloe's stomach turn. He stood up, walking toward the window, his back to her. "How far along?" he asked, his voice devoid of any emotion. 2 months, maybe more," Chloe replied, her voice barely above a whisper. Alex stayed silent for a long moment, staring out at the city. Chloe could feel the distance between them growing, as if an invisible wall had just been erected. She waited, hoping for some kind of response, something that would show he cared. But when he finally turned around, his face was hard, unreadable. "Look, Chloe," he began, his tone cold and businesslike, "this isn't ideal. You're young, and you have your whole life ahead of you. There's no reason to complicate things." Chloe blinked, confused by his words. "What are you saying?" Alex sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I'm saying it's better for both of us if you take care of it." Her breath caught in her throat. "Take care of it, you mean?" "Yes," Alex said, his eyes locking onto hers. "I'll pay for everything, whatever you need, but it's not going to work. I can't be a part of this." Chloe felt like the floor had just been pulled out from under her. She had expected Alex to be shocked, maybe even upset, but she hadn't expected this. The coldness, the complete lack of responsibility. It was as if he was talking about a minor inconvenience, not a child, their child. "I don't want your money," Chloe said, her voice shaking with emotion. "I didn't come here for that." "Chloe, be reasonable," Alex replied, his voice firm. "And this is the best option for both of us. I'm not the kind of man who can do this. You know that." Tears welled up in Chloe's eyes as she realized the truth. Alex wasn't going to support her. He wasn't going to be there for her or the baby. In his eyes, this wasn't a life-changing event. It was just a problem that needed to be fixed. Chloe stood up, her hands trembling. I thought maybe you'd care," she whispered. I do care," Alex said, his voice softening slightly. "But this isn't about feelings. It's about what's best for everyone involved." "What's best for you?" Chloe corrected, her voice laced with bitterness. Alex didn't respond. He didn't have to. His silence said it all. Feeling the weight of his rejection, Chloe turned toward the door. But before she could leave, Alex stopped her, handing her a small envelope. "Take this," he said quietly. It's enough to cover everything. And take this too." He reached into his pocket and pulled out an old, worn pocket watch, something Chloe had seen him carry before, but never asked about. "It's from my father," he explained. "I don't know why, but maybe it'll mean something to you." Chloe stared at the watch for a moment before taking it in her hand. It felt heavy, like the weight of all the years and family history it carried. But as she looked at it, she realized it didn't matter. Not anymore. Without another word, Chloe walked out of the penthouse, her heart shattered. She clutched the envelope and the watch tightly in her hands, knowing that she would never use the money. She had made her decision the moment she saw the result of that test. She was going to keep the baby, alone, if necessary. As Chloe stepped into the elevator, the tears finally fell, silently streaming down her face. The doors closed, sealing off the life she had thought she might have with Alex. Now she was on her own. The cold night air hit her as she exited the building, but Chloe barely noticed. Her mind was racing, her heart aching. She was going to be a mother, and no matter what Alex said, no matter how cruel his rejection had been, she knew she had the strength to do this. For her child, for their future. The days following Chloe's confrontation with Alex were a blur. She tried to focus on her studies, tried to pretend that her life was still the same, but the reality of her situation loomed over her like a shadow she couldn't escape. The rejection, the coldness in Alex's eyes, replayed in her mind every time she closed her eyes. She had wanted him to be there for her and their child, but it was clear now that she would be alone in this journey. Chloe stood in front of the mirror in her small bathroom, her hand resting on her still flat stomach. The pregnancy wasn't visible yet, but she could feel the changes in her body, the exhaustion, the waves of nausea, and the emotional roller coaster that came with it. She knew that soon enough, the world would see the proof of her new reality. A knock on the door pulled her out of her thoughts. Chloe opened it to find Samantha, her best friend and roommate, standing there with a worried expression. Sam had known something was wrong, but Chloe had been too overwhelmed to share the full story. "Hey," Sam said, stepping inside. "You've been quiet lately. Is everything okay?" Chloe hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "I'm fine. She lied, but her voice cracked. She wasn't fine. She had never been further from fine. Sam gave her a skeptical look, crossing her arms. "You don't look fine." Chloe sat down on the edge of the bed, her hands trembling. She needed to tell someone. She couldn't keep carrying this weight alone. "Sam, I'm pregnant," Chloe confessed, her voice barely audible. Sam's eyes widened in shock. She sat down next to Chloe, processing the news. "Pregnant? Are you sure?" Chloe nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. "It's Alex's. I told him, but he doesn't want anything to do with it." Sam's shock quickly turned to anger. "That bastard," she spat. "How could he just walk away like that?" Chloe wiped her tears, her heart heavy. "He offered me money to get an abortion." Sam's jaw dropped, her fists clenched. "Are you serious? That's disgusting." "I couldn't believe it either," Chloe admitted, her voice breaking. "I thought maybe he'd care, but all he cared about was himself." Sam reached over and took Chloe's hand. "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to keep the baby," Chloe said firmly, though her voice still wavered with the enormity of the decision. I won't get rid of it. This baby is mine, and I'll figure out how to take care of us." Sam squeezed Chloe's hand tighter. "You're not alone in this. I'm here for you, whatever you need. You're going to be an amazing mom." Chloe smiled weakly, grateful for Sam's support. But as much as Sam's words comforted her, Chloe knew the road ahead would be difficult. She didn't have Alex's wealth or power, and raising a child as a single mother was no easy feat. The following week, Chloe made a decision. She couldn't bear to keep the envelope of money Alex had given her. It felt like blood money, a reminder of his coldness and the rejection she'd faced. She had no intention of using it, but there was one thing she couldn't bring herself to throw away: the pocket watch Alex had given her. It sat on the table in her living room, its old, worn surface reflecting the dim light of the apartment. Chloe had spent hours staring at it, wondering why Alex had given her something so personal, especially in a moment that had felt so devoid of emotion. Was it guilt? A symbol of something he couldn't express? She couldn't understand it, but somehow the watch seemed to carry a weight beyond its physical presence. Chloe decided to keep it, not for herself, but for the baby. She didn't know what the future held, but she thought that maybe one day her child would want to know about their father. The watch would be a part of that story, even if Alex himself wouldn't be. Months passed, and Chloe's belly grew along with her resolve. She spent her days finishing her classes, working shifts at the bookstore, and preparing for the baby's arrival. Every kick she felt, every sign of life inside her, reminded her that she was doing the right thing. This child was hers, and no matter what challenges lay ahead, she would give them the love and care they deserved. But despite her determination, the pain of Alex's abandonment lingered. Chloe had tried to move on, but it wasn't easy. She couldn't escape the memories of him, the nights they spent together, the brief moments when she thought there might be something more between them. Now, all that was left was the emptiness of what could have been. One evening, as Chloe was getting ready to leave work, she received an unexpected visitor. Rachel, Alex's assistant, walked into the bookstore, her expression tight and formal. "Chloe," Rachel said, approaching her cautiously. "Can we talk?" Chloe's stomach churned. She hadn't seen or heard from Alex since that night in his penthouse. "What are you doing here?" Chloe asked, her voice wary. "I'm here on behalf of Alex," Rachel said, her tone professional. "He wanted me to check on you and make sure you're okay." Chloe let out a bitter laugh. "He sent you to check on me? After everything?" Rachel's expression softened, but she didn't argue. "I know it's complicated, Chloe, but Alex wanted to make sure you're taken care of." "I don't need his money," Chloe said sharply, crossing her arms. "I'm not going to take a cent from him." Rachel nodded, as if she had expected that response. "He also wanted you to have this." She pulled out a small box from her purse and handed it to Chloe. Chloe hesitated before taking the box. Inside, she found a simple silver bracelet, engraved with the initials R.G., Ryan Graham. Chloe's heart skipped a beat as she read the name, Ryan, Was this Alex's way of acknowledging the child, of offering some semblance of connection? "I don't understand," Chloe said, looking up at Rachel. Rachel sighed. "Alex is complicated, Chloe. He doesn't know how to deal with emotions, but he's trying in his own way. The bracelet is for the baby. Ryan is the name he wanted to give him. If you're okay with that." Chloe's mind raced. She hadn't even thought about names yet, but hearing Alex's choice felt strange, like a reminder of the part of him that still lingered in her life, whether she liked it or not. "I'll think about it," Chloe said quietly, closing the box and placing it back on the counter. "But tell Alex, this changes nothing. I'm doing this on my own." Rachel nodded. "I understand. Just know that if you ever need anything, he's willing to help." Chloe watched as Rachel turned and left the bookstore, her footsteps echoing in the silence. The bracelet felt heavy in her hand, a tangible link to the man who had abandoned them. But as Chloe stared at the name engraved on it, Ryan, she felt something shift inside her. This baby was hers, and while Alex may have chosen the name, it would be Chloe who gave it meaning. She would raise Ryan with love, with strength, and with the knowledge that they didn't need anyone but each other. As the months continued to pass, Chloe's determination grew stronger. She attended her doctor's appointments alone, decorated the nursery on a tight budget, and made plans for her future. She was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. When the day finally came, Chloe held her newborn son in her arms, tears streaming down her face. "Ryan," she whispered, the name rolling off her tongue like a promise. "I'm going to give you the world." And in that moment, Chloe knew that no matter how painful the journey had been, no matter how much Alex had hurt her, she had found something more powerful than all the heartbreak in the world: unconditional love. The years passed quickly for Chloe, each one filled with moments of joy, struggle, and sacrifice. Raising Ryan as a single mother was harder than she had imagined, but it was also more rewarding than she could have ever expected. Chloe poured her heart and soul into giving Ryan the best life she could, even though the absence of his father was always a quiet shadow in the background. In their small apartment on the outskirts of New York, Chloe and Ryan built their life together. The walls of their modest home were lined with shelves of second-hand books, toys that Ryan adored, and pictures of their moments together. Ryan, with his dark hair and piercing blue eyes, was the spitting image of his father. Every time Chloe looked at him, she was reminded of Alex. But over time, the sting of that memory faded. Her love for Ryan overshadowed everything else. Ryan was a curious and bright child, always asking questions about the world around him. From the time he could talk, Chloe encouraged him to explore, to learn, and to never stop asking those questions. She wanted him to have the kind of education and opportunities she never did, and that meant working harder than ever. By day, Chloe worked multiple jobs, juggling shifts at a local bookstore and as a receptionist at a doctor's office. By night, she was a mother, reading Ryan bedtime stories, helping him with his homework, and doing her best to create a sense of normalcy in their little world. The balance was exhausting, and there were nights when Chloe cried herself to sleep from the sheer weight of it all, but she never let Ryan see that. To him, she was strong, and that's how she wanted it to stay. As Ryan grew older, his questions shifted. He began to ask about his father. At first, it was simple curiosity, the kind that any child has when they realize something is missing. "Mom, why don't I have a dad?" Ryan would ask, his young eyes searching hers for answers. Chloe had prepared for this moment for years, but it didn't make the conversation any easier. "Ryan," Chloe said softly one evening, sitting on the couch with him, "your dad, he wasn't ready to be a father. But that doesn't mean he didn't care about you." Ryan looked down, his small hands fidgeting with the edge of his shirt. "Do I look like him?" Chloe smiled sadly, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. "Yes, you do. You look a lot like him. Will I ever meet him?" Ryan's voice was quiet, hesitant. Chloe hesitated, her heart aching at the thought of Alex, the man who had walked away from them so easily. "I don't know, sweetheart. Maybe someday." Ryan didn't push the subject further that night, but Chloe knew the questions would keep coming. As he got older, the desire to know about his father would only grow stronger. She wasn't sure how she would handle it when the time came. But for now, she focused on giving Ryan as much love and stability as she could. Despite the challenges, Chloe watched with pride as Ryan thrived. He was a bright student, excelling in school and showing a natural gift for debating and arguing his points, a skill Chloe couldn't help but think he inherited from Alex. Teachers praised him for his intelligence and his dedication, and as Ryan entered high school, it became clear that he had the potential to achieve great things. Chloe supported his ambitions, doing everything she could to make sure he had the opportunities she never had. But as Ryan excelled, Chloe often felt the weight of her sacrifices. There were things she had given up for him, her dreams of becoming a writer, the chance to travel, even the possibility of finding love again. Her entire life had been dedicated to Ryan, and while she never regretted that choice, it came with its own kind of loneliness. One evening, after a long day at work, Chloe sat at the kitchen table, balancing a stack of bills. Ryan, now 17 and in his final year of high school, walked in and grabbed a soda from the fridge. He glanced at the pile of envelopes in front of his mom, his brow furrowing. "Is everything okay?" Ryan asked, sitting down across from her. Chloe smiled wearily. "Everything's fine, just a lot of bills this month. Don't worry about it." But Ryan did worry. He had always been observant, always aware of the fact that his mom worked harder than most to make ends meet. "You shouldn't have to do this alone," he said quietly. "I'll get a job. I can help with the bills." Chloe shook her head, her heart swelling with pride, but also with sadness. "You need to focus on school, Ryan. You have your whole life ahead of you." "I'm fine." Ryan didn't look convinced. "I don't want you to keep struggling because of me." "You're not the reason I'm struggling," Chloe said firmly, reaching across the table to take his hand. "You're the reason I keep going. Don't ever forget that." Ryan looked down, his expression conflicted. I wish I could do more." "You're doing more than enough," Chloe reassured him. "You're getting good grades, staying focused on your future. That's all I need from you." Ryan nodded, but the conversation left a lingering tension in the air. Chloe knew that as much as she wanted to protect Ryan from the financial strain they faced, he was old enough to understand it now. He was no longer the little boy who believed his mother could do anything. He was becoming a man, and with that came the desire to shoulder some of the burden she had carried for so long. As Ryan neared graduation, his ambitions became clearer. He wanted to go to law school, inspired by his own sense of justice and fairness. Chloe couldn't have been prouder. She saw in him the qualities that made her believe he could change the world. His empathy, his intelligence, and his unshakable sense of right and wrong. But she also knew that law school was expensive, and despite Ryan's academic achievements, scholarships could only cover so much. One evening, as they sat down for dinner, Ryan brought up the subject that had been weighing on his mind for weeks. "Mom, I've been thinking," he began cautiously, "about Dad." Chloe's heart sank. She had always known this day would come, but that didn't make it any easier. "What about him?" she asked, keeping her voice steady. "I want to know who he is," Ryan said, his voice firm. "I want to find him." Chloe felt her chest tighten. "Ryan, I know you've done everything for me," Ryan continued, his eyes filled with determination, "and I love you for that. But I need to know where I come from. I need to understand why he wasn't there." Chloe closed her eyes for a moment, trying to gather her thoughts. She had always wanted to protect Ryan from the truth, from the pain of knowing that his father had walked away. But she also knew that Ryan deserved answers, and she couldn't keep them from him forever. "I don't know where he is," Chloe admitted softly. He made it clear that he didn't want to be part of our lives." Ryan looked down, disappointment flickering across his face. "Do you think he's changed?" Chloe didn't know how to answer that. Could people like Alex really change? After all these years, was it possible that he had any regrets? "I don't know," she said honestly. "But if you want to find him, I won't stop you." Ryan nodded, determination hardening his features. "I need to do this, Mom. For me, for us." Chloe reached across the table, placing her hand over his. "Just be careful, Ryan. Sometimes the answers we're looking for aren't what we expect." Ryan couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. For years, he had accepted his life with Chloe as it was, just the two of them against the world. She had been everything to him, a loving mother, a provider, a mentor. But now, as he stood on the precipice of adulthood, the questions about his father gnawed at him with increasing intensity. Who was the man who had abandoned him? Why had he left? And more importantly, did he even care about Ryan at all? The decision to search for Alex wasn't an easy one. Ryan knew it would bring up painful memories for his mother, memories she had worked hard to bury, but the desire to know his roots was too strong to ignore. He needed closure, one way or another. One afternoon, while Chloe was at work, Ryan sat down at the old wooden desk in his room. The bracelet engraved with RG sat in his hand, its significance growing heavier with each passing day. He had no memories of his father, no stories to cling to. All he had was the name Chloe had reluctantly shared with him, Alex Graham. Ryan opened his laptop and typed the name into a search engine, his heart pounding. The results appeared in seconds, and there, among a sea of corporate profiles and news articles, was his father, Alex Graham, CEO of Graham Enterprises, a multi-million-dollar corporation. Ryan's eyes widened as he clicked on the first link, a business profile detailing Alex's rise to power in the financial world. The man staring back at him from the photograph was older now, but Ryan could still see the similarities. The same dark hair, the same piercing blue eyes. It was like looking into a mirror, but at an older, more polished version of himself. Ryan sat back in his chair, stunned. His father was no ordinary man. He wasn't some anonymous figure lost to the passage of time. He was a powerful businessman, a man who had built an empire. And yet, despite all his wealth and success, he had chosen to leave Ryan and Chloe behind. Why? That was the question Ryan couldn't answer, and it was the one that drove him forward. He spent the next several days diving deeper into Alex's life, combing through interviews, articles, and press releases. The more he learned, the more conflicted he felt. On the surface, Alex appeared to be everything Ryan had expected. A man driven by ambition, focused on success above all else. But there were also glimpses of something deeper. A man who had come from humble beginnings, who had fought to make a name for himself in a cutthroat industry. Ryan wondered if his father had ever thought about him. Was Alex the kind of man who regretted his decisions, or had he moved on without a second thought? The more Ryan searched, the more frustrated he became. He couldn't find any mention of Alex's personal life, no details about family or relationships. It was as if Alex had deliberately kept that part of his life hidden from the public. Ryan's determination grew with every dead end. He needed answers, and he wasn't going to stop until he got them. One evening, Ryan sat across from Chloe at their small kitchen table. The air was thick with tension, and Ryan knew it was time to confront the topic that had been on his mind for weeks. "Mom," Ryan began, his voice steady but serious, "I need to talk to you about something." Chloe looked up from her plate, sensing the weight of his words. "What's on your mind?" "I've been looking into my father," Ryan admitted, watching Chloe's expression carefully. "I found him. He's still in New York. He's the CEO of a company called Graham Enterprises." Chloe's face paled, her fork clattering softly against her plate. She had always known this moment would come, but she wasn't prepared for it. The mention of Alex's name brought back a flood of memories, memories she had worked hard to keep at bay. "Ryan," Chloe's voice trembled slightly, "I know you want to know more about him, but Alex, he's not who you think he is." "I'm not expecting him to be a hero, Mum," Ryan said, his eyes filled with resolve. "But I deserve to know the truth. Why did he leave us? Why didn't he ever try to contact me?" Chloe sighed, pushing her plate aside. She knew this conversation couldn't be avoided any longer. Alex wasn't ready for the responsibility of being a father. When I told him about the pregnancy, he walked away. He didn't want to be a part of our lives. Ryan listened, his heart aching at the confirmation of what he had suspected. But there was more he needed to know. Did he ever offer to help? Did he ever try to reach out? Chloe shook her head, tears welling in her eyes. No. After that night, I never heard from him again. He made it clear that he wasn't interested in being a father. Ryan clenched his fists under the table, anger boiling in his chest. How could someone just abandon their child like that? How could Alex have built an empire while ignoring the fact that his own son existed? I need to talk to him, Ryan said finally, his voice firm. I need to hear it from him. Chloe's heart sank. She wanted to protect Ryan from the pain she had endured, from the cruel reality that Alex had chosen his career over their family. But she also knew that Ryan was an adult now, and she couldn't shield him from the truth forever. If that's what you need to do, Ryan, Chloe said softly, then I won't stop you. But just be careful. Alex isn't the man you wish he was. Ryan nodded, though his mind was already racing ahead. He had no illusions about who Alex might be. He didn't expect his father to suddenly welcome him with open arms, but he needed closure. He needed to look Alex in the eye and ask him why he had abandoned them. The next few days were a blur of planning. Ryan researched everything he could about Graham Enterprises, learning about the company's headquarters in Midtown Manhattan. He knew he couldn't just walk into Alex's office. He would need a plan, something that would allow him to get past the layers of security and gatekeepers that surrounded a man like Alex. Finally, Ryan decided on a strategy. There was an upcoming gala, a charity event hosted by Graham Enterprises at one of the most prestigious venues in the city. It was the perfect opportunity. Ryan didn't know how he would get in yet, but he was determined to try. If he could just get close enough to Alex, maybe he could finally have the conversation he had been waiting for his whole life. The night of the gala arrived, and Ryan found himself standing outside the towering building where the event was being held. The entrance was swarming with people, well-dressed elites, media and security guards stationed at every corner. Ryan watched from a distance, his heart pounding. This was it. His chance to confront the man who had shaped his life from the shadows. He had managed to get his hands on a suit from a thrift store, and while it wasn't as polished as the other guests, it would have to do. Ryan approached the entrance cautiously, his nerves on edge. He hadn't been invited, but he had crafted a believable story in case anyone asked. As he approached the front, a security guard stopped him. "Full name?" the guard asked, checking the guest list on his clipboard. "Ryan Graham," he said confidently, his voice steady despite the knots in his stomach. The guard glanced at the list, and for a moment, Ryan feared he would be turned away. But then the guard nodded. "Go ahead." Ryan exhaled a sigh of relief as he walked into the grand ballroom. The opulence of the event was overwhelming. Chandeliers hung from the ceiling, and waiters moved gracefully through the crowd with trays of champagne. But Ryan wasn't there to admire the scenery. His eyes scanned the room, searching for one man. And then he saw him. Alex Graham stood near the center of the room, surrounded by business associates, his presence commanding as always. Ryan's heart pounded in his chest as he took a step forward. This was the moment he had been waiting for. The moment he would finally confront the man who had abandoned him. The grandeur of the gala was overwhelming for Ryan as he walked through the ballroom. The scent of expensive perfume and the hum of sophisticated conversation surrounded him, but his mind was focused on one thing: Alex Graham. This was the man who had abandoned him before he was even born, and now, standing just across the room, Alex was within reach. For a moment, Ryan's steps faltered. He had imagined this confrontation 1,000 times, but now that it was about to happen, fear crept in. What would Alex say? Would he even care? Taking a deep breath, Ryan straightened his jacket and continued toward Alex. He had come this far, and he couldn't back down now. As he got closer, he noticed the way people hovered around Alex, hanging on his every word. It was clear that Alex commanded respect and attention in any room he entered. He was dressed in an immaculate black tuxedo, his posture straight and confident. The years had been kind to him. His sharp features were as striking as ever, though there were hints of grey at his temples now. Ryan hesitated, unsure of how to approach. He watched as Alex laughed at something a colleague said, completely unaware that the son he had abandoned was standing just a few feet away. Ryan's heart pounded in his chest. This was it, the moment he had been waiting for. Suddenly, Alex's eyes drifted across the room, and for a brief moment, they locked onto Ryan's. There was no recognition in Alex's gaze, no spark of familiarity, but something shifted in his expression. His eyes lingered on Ryan longer than they should have, as if he was trying to place him, to figure out why this young man seemed oddly familiar. Ryan's breath caught in his throat as he stood frozen under his father's scrutiny. It wasn't until Alex's gaze drifted downward, noticing the small, old pocket watch Ryan had attached to his suit jacket, that something changed. Alex's expression faltered, his eyes widening slightly in recognition. The watch. Ryan saw the flicker of realization cross Alex's face, and suddenly, the dynamic of the room shifted. Alex excused himself from the group he was speaking with and started walking toward Ryan, his expression serious, almost bewildered. Ryan's palms began to sweat, and his heart raced even faster. He had expected to be the one to approach Alex, but now it was Alex coming to him. As Alex neared, Ryan stood his ground, his resolve strengthening with each step his father took. The moment was surreal. Here he was, face to face with the man who had been nothing more than a ghost in his life. "You," Alex said, his voice low but commanding, as he stopped just a few feet away from Ryan. His eyes were locked onto the pocket watch. "Where did you get that?" Ryan clenched his jaw, his emotions swirling inside him. "It was a gift," he said evenly, his voice steady despite the storm of feelings beneath the surface. "A do from you." Alex's face tightened, and for a moment, Ryan could see the conflict in his father's eyes. He glanced around the room as if checking to make sure no one was paying attention to their conversation. Then, in a quieter tone, he asked, "Who are you?" Ryan's chest tightened at the question, but he met Alex's gaze with defiance. "I think you already know the answer to that." Alex's eyes narrowed, and he took a step closer, his voice barely above a whisper now. "Are you Chloe's son?" Ryan felt a surge of anger at the way Alex had phrased it. Chloe's son. As if that was all he was, someone who belonged to Chloe, not Alex. "Yes," Ryan replied, his voice sharp. "I'm your son." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with years of abandonment and unspoken pain. Alex's expression didn't change, but Ryan saw something flicker in his eyes, something like regret, or maybe shock. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The noise of the gala seemed to fade into the background as the two of them stood there facing each other for the first time. Ryan's heart was pounding, and he felt a mix of emotions, anger, confusion, and a desperate need for answers. Alex was the first to break the silence. I didn't know you existed," he said, his voice strained. Ryan's eyes widened in disbelief. "You're lying," he said, his voice trembling with rage. "You knew about me. Chloe told you, and you walked away." Alex's jaw tightened, and he took a step back, running a hand through his hair. "It's not that simple," he muttered, his gaze shifting away from Ryan's. I wasn't ready." "You weren't ready?" Ryan's voice rose, cutting through the hum of the gala. A few heads turned in their direction, but Ryan didn't care. "I grew up without a father, because you weren't ready? Do you have any idea what that did to us? To her?" Alex's face paled slightly, and for the first time, Ryan saw something break in his father's composure. Alex opened his mouth to respond, but Ryan wasn't done. "Do you know how many times I asked her why I didn't have a dad? How many times I wondered what was wrong with me, why you didn't want me?" Ryan's voice cracked as years of buried hurt spilled out. She gave up everything for me. She worked herself to the bone to make sure I had a future, and you were out here building an empire, acting like we didn't exist. The words hit Alex like a blow, and he visibly flinched. For a moment, his carefully constructed facade crumbled, and Ryan saw the weight of his father's guilt, but it wasn't enough. Not yet. You owe her everything, Ryan continued, his voice hard. And you owe me an explanation. Alex stood there, speechless. He looked at Ryan, his son, for what felt like the first time. Really looked at him. The resemblance was undeniable, and for the first time, Alex seemed to understand the gravity of what he had done, the life he had missed, the years he could never get back. I made mistakes, Alex admitted, his voice low, almost defeated. I was selfish, and I was scared. I thought it was easier to walk away. Easier for who? Ryan shot back, his anger still simmering beneath the surface. You've had a life full of success, money, power. What did we get? Nothing. We got nothing from you. Alex looked away, his face etched with regret. And you're right, he said quietly. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't even deserve it. But I am sorry. Ryan didn't know what to say. The apology, if it could even be called that, was a start. But it didn't erase the years of pain. It didn't change the fact that Alex had chosen to walk away when they needed him most. I didn't come here for your apology, Ryan said, his voice cold. I came here for answers. Alex nodded slowly, as if understanding. I'll give you whatever answers you want. Just not here. This isn't the place. Ryan stared at him for a long moment, his emotions warring inside him. Part of him wanted to walk away, to leave Alex behind just as Alex had left them. But another part of him, the part that had always wanted to know his father, couldn't let go that easily. Tomorrow, Ryan said, his voice firm. We'll talk tomorrow. Alex nodded again, the tension between them thick. Tomorrow, he agreed. Without another word, Ryan turned and walked away, his heart heavy with the weight of everything that had just happened. He had gotten the confrontation he wanted, but it didn't bring the relief he had hoped for. Instead, it left him with more questions, more confusion, but one thing was clear, this wasn't over. As Ryan left the gala, the cool night air hit his face, grounding him. He had taken the first step in confronting his past, but the road ahead was still uncertain. Tomorrow, he would get his answers, and whatever happened next, he was ready to face it. The next morning, Ryan woke up with a heavy weight on his chest. The confrontation with Alex from the night before replayed in his mind, every word and every emotion still fresh. The encounter had been tense, but it hadn't given him the closure he had hoped for. He wasn't sure what he had expected from his father, maybe anger, maybe indifference, but Alex's guilt, his quiet remorse, had surprised him. It left Ryan feeling conflicted. For years, Ryan had imagined his father as a heartless, selfish man, too busy building an empire to care about his son. And while that image wasn't entirely wrong, the Alex he met last night had shown cracks in that facade. There had been moments of real regret in Alex's eyes, moments that suggested maybe, just maybe, he wasn't completely devoid of emotion. Ryan spent most of the morning pacing around his small apartment, waiting for the time he and Alex had agreed to meet. He had no idea what to expect from this conversation. Would Alex try to explain his reasons for abandoning them? Would he try to justify his actions? And more importantly, would Ryan even be able to forgive him? Chloe noticed Ryan's unease, though she didn't press him for details. She had known that once Ryan met Alex, it would stir up old wounds, both for him and for her. Chloe's heart ached, knowing how much Ryan had wanted this moment, but she also feared what it might do to him. She had lived with the pain of Alex's abandonment for years, but this was the first time Ryan was confronting it head-on. "Are you okay?" Chloe asked gently, watching as Ryan poured himself another cup of coffee, though it was clear he wasn't really drinking it. Ryan glanced at her, his mind elsewhere. "I don't know," he admitted. "I thought meeting him would give me some kind of clarity, but it just made things more complicated. Chloe nodded, understanding all too well. It's not easy, facing him. I spent years trying to forget about him, but it's not something you can just erase. Ryan sat down at the table, his hands wrapped around the warm mug. He wants to talk today. I don't know what he's going to say, but I need to hear it. Chloe's chest tightened, but she forced herself to stay calm. Whatever he says, just remember who you are, Ryan. You've built a life for yourself, without him. Don't let his mistakes define you. Ryan looked at his mother, the woman who had given him everything without ever asking for anything in return. He knew how much she had sacrificed for him, how hard it had been for her to raise him on her own. And yet, despite everything, Chloe had never spoken badly of Alex. She had let Ryan form his own opinions, make his own choices. That was something Ryan respected deeply about his mother. Her strength, her grace in the face of hardship. I won't, Ryan promised. I need to understand why he did it, why he left. Chloe gave him a sad smile. I hope you get the answers you're looking for. Ryan arrived at the cafe Alex had suggested a few minutes early. It was a quiet, upscale place, far from the noise and bustle of the city. The kind of place where business deals were probably made over espresso and croissants. Ryan had chosen a table near the back, away from the main entrance, and waited. His mind raced with questions. What could Alex possibly say to make up for years of absence? Was there even an explanation that could justify what he had done? Ryan wasn't sure, but he was determined to hear it for himself. A few minutes later, Alex walked in. He was dressed more casually than the night before, but he still carried himself with the confidence of a man used to being in control. As he approached the table, Ryan could see the tension in his posture, the weight of the years between them hanging heavy in the air. Ryan, Alex greeted him as he sat down, his voice subdued. There was none of the bravado or charm that had defined him the night before. Today, Alex looked more vulnerable, more human. Alex, Ryan replied, his voice clipped. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence between them was thick, filled with everything left unsaid. Alex cleared his throat, his eyes meeting Ryan's with a mixture of apprehension and guilt. I know there's nothing I can say to make up for what I did, Alex began quietly, but I want to try. I owe you that much. Ryan's jaw tightened, but he nodded for Alex to continue. He wasn't going to make this easy for his father, but he was willing to listen. Alex let out a slow breath. When Chloe told me she was pregnant, I was terrified. I know that's not an excuse, but it's the truth. My life was complicated back then. I had just started building the company, and I wasn't ready for a child. Ryan's eyes narrowed. So you just walked away. Alex winced at the bluntness of Ryan's words, but he didn't deny it. Yes, he admitted, I was selfish. I thought that by walking away, I was avoiding making things worse. I convinced myself that you and Chloe would be better off without me in the picture. Ryan shook his head, his anger rising again. Better off? Do you have any idea what it was like for her? For me, we struggled while you were out there building your empire, acting like we didn't exist. I know, Alex said, his voice thick with regret. I know that now. I made a terrible mistake, and I've regretted it every day since. Then why didn't you do anything about it? Ryan's voice cracked with emotion. If you regretted it so much, why didn't you try to find me? Why didn't you ever reach out? Alex rubbed a hand over his face, clearly grappling with the weight of his decisions. I wanted to, he confessed. So many times I wanted to, but every time I thought, what if it's too late? What if I've already done too much damage? Ryan stared at him, his heart aching. You could have at least tried. We could have figured something out, but instead, you just left us. I know, Alex said, his voice breaking, and I'm sorry. I know that's not enough, but it's all I have. I can't change the past, but I want to try to make things right now, if you'll let me. Ryan sat back, the words hanging in the air. He had spent his entire life imagining what this moment would be like, what he would say to his father, how he would finally get the closure he needed. But now that he was here, face to face with Alex, it wasn't as simple as he had thought. "How?" Ryan asked, his voice quieter now. "How do you make this right?" Alex looked down at the table, as if searching for an answer. When he spoke, his voice was sincere. "I don't know, but I'm willing to try, if you'll let me. I want to be part of your life, Ryan. I know I've missed so much, but I want to be there now, however I can." Ryan's chest tightened. Part of him wanted to push Alex away, to tell him that it was too late, that the damage had already been done. But another part of him, the part that had always wondered what it would be like to have a father, was tempted to let him in, to see if there was any way to rebuild what had been broken. "It's not going to be easy," Ryan said, his voice steady. "You can't just walk back into my life and expect everything to be fine." "I know," Alex replied. "I don't expect that, but I'm willing to put in the work if you'll give me a chance." Ryan looked at his father, really looked at him. For the first time, he saw not just the man who had abandoned him, but a man who was flawed, who had made terrible mistakes, but who was trying, finally, to do the right thing. "I'll think about it," Ryan said after a long pause. Alex nodded, his eyes filled with a mixture of hope and sorrow. "That's all I can ask for." They sat in silence for a few more moments, the weight of everything still heavy between them. But for the first time in Ryan's life, it felt like there was a possibility, a small, fragile possibility, that things could be different. Ryan left the cafe feeling conflicted. His conversation with Alex had been both overwhelming and underwhelming at the same time. There had been no dramatic revelations, no profound apologies that could erase the years of absence, but there had been something, regret, perhaps, or a flicker of hope that maybe, just maybe, his father wanted to make things right. As he walked through the streets of New York, Ryan's mind raced. What did it mean that Alex wanted to be part of his life now? Was it even possible to rebuild a relationship that had never existed in the first place? Ryan wasn't sure if he could trust Alex's intentions, but part of him wanted to believe that people could change. After all, wasn't that what he had been hoping for all these years? By the time he reached the apartment, Ryan still hadn't made up his mind about what to do next. He pushed open the door and found Chloe sitting at the kitchen table, her expression anxious. She had been waiting for him to come back, knowing that the meeting with Alex would stir up difficult emotions. "How did it go?" Chloe asked carefully, her eyes scanning Ryan's face for any sign of how things had gone. Ryan dropped his keys on the counter and sat down across from her, running a hand through his hair. "It was complicated," he admitted. He apologized. "But I don't know if that's enough." Chloe nodded slowly, her heart heavy. She had always known that this day would come, that Ryan would need to confront his father and hear the answers for himself. But Chloe had lived through her own version of this story years ago, and she knew how easily words could be manipulated, how empty promises could seem sincere. "I'm not surprised," Chloe said softly. He's good at saying what people want to hear." Ryan looked up, surprised by the bitterness in his mother's voice. Chloe had always been so composed when it came to Alex, never speaking ill of him. This was the first time Ryan had seen her anger, her disappointment, bubble to the surface. "You don't think he's changed?" Ryan asked. Unsure of what he wanted her to say, Chloe sighed, leaning back in her chair. "I don't know, Ryan. People can change, but Alex, he's always been focused on one thing, himself. I don't want to sound harsh, but I don't want you to get hurt." Ryan frowned, feeling the weight of her words. He seemed genuine. He said he regretted leaving us, that he wanted to make things right. Chloe's eyes softened with sympathy. "I'm sure he feels some guilt, but feeling guilty doesn't always mean someone is ready to change. Alex has spent his whole life making decisions that benefit him, and I don't want you to get caught up in his world and end up disappointed." Ryan sat back, thinking about his conversation with Alex. His father had seemed sincere, but Chloe's words planted seeds of doubt. Could he really trust Alex? Or was this just another one of his manipulations? a way to assuage his guilt without actually committing to change. "But do you think I should cut him off completely?" Ryan asked quietly, unsure of what the right answer was. Chloe hesitated. She didn't want to push Ryan into making a decision one way or another. This was his journey, his relationship to navigate. But she also didn't want him to walk blindly into a situation that could cause him even more pain. "I think you should be cautious," Chloe said carefully. "Alex has a way of making people believe what they want to believe. But at the end of the day, you have to decide what kind of relationship you want with him, if any." Ryan nodded, feeling the weight of her words. He wasn't ready to make a decision yet, but Chloe's warning lingered in his mind. He had spent his whole life wondering about his father, imagining what it would be like to finally meet him. Now that it had happened, the reality was far messier than he had anticipated. "I'll be careful," Ryan promised, though even as he said the words, he wasn't sure what they meant. Was he willing to give Alex a chance, to let him back into his life, or was he setting himself up for disappointment, just as Chloe feared? The next few days passed in a blur. Ryan tried to focus on his daily life, his job, his friends, his plans for the future, but the conversation with Alex weighed on him constantly. He couldn't stop replaying it in his mind, analyzing every word, every look. Was Alex being honest, or was this just another way for him to ease his conscience? Ryan knew he needed to make a decision soon. He couldn't live in limbo forever, torn between giving Alex a chance and protecting himself from further hurt. But making that decision was harder than he had imagined. One evening, as Ryan was getting ready for bed, his phone buzzed with a text message. He glanced at the screen and saw that it was from Alex. "Alex, I know I've already said this, but I'm sorry for everything. I'd really like to meet again, if you're willing. No pressure, but I'd like the chance to get to know you better." Ryan stared at the message, his thumb hovering over the screen. Part of him wanted to ignore it, to walk away and avoid the mess that came with letting Alex back into his life. But another part of him, the part that had always wondered what it would be like to have a father, wanted to respond. He wanted to believe that maybe Alex could change, that maybe they could build something, however fragile. Finally, after a long pause, Ryan typed a short response. "Ryan, let's meet tomorrow." The next day, Ryan found himself waiting outside the same cafe where they had met before. He wasn't sure why he had chosen this place again, but it felt right somehow, like this was where everything had started, and this was where they would either move forward or fall apart. Alex arrived a few minutes later, looking more relaxed than the last time they had met. He smiled cautiously as he approached the table, clearly unsure of how Ryan was feeling. "Thanks for meeting me," Alex said as he sat down. Ryan nodded, not quite ready to dive into the conversation. He wasn't sure what he wanted from this meeting. An explanation, a deeper apology, or maybe just some clarity. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said," Ryan began slowly, "about wanting to be part of my life." Alex looked at him, his expression serious. "I meant it, Ryan. I know I've missed so much, and I know I can't make up for the past, but I want to try." Ryan nodded, his mind racing. "But what does that look like to you? How do you think we can have a relationship after all these years?" Alex hesitated, clearly grappling with how to answer. "I don't have all the answers," he admitted. "I just know that I don't want to lose the chance to get to know you. I want to be there for you, whatever that looks like." Ryan leaned back in his chair, studying his father. He could see the sincerity in Alex's eyes, but there was still a part of him that felt wary, unsure if this was truly the right path to take. "And what about Mom?" Ryan asked, his voice quieter now. "She's the one who raised me, who did everything for me. How do you fit into that?" Alex's expression softened. "I know I don't deserve a place in your life, not after everything Chloe has done for you. She's an incredible woman, and I'm grateful for everything she's given you, but I'm not trying to take her place. I just want to be part of your world, if you'll let me." Ryan looked down at the table, his emotions swirling inside him. This wasn't easy. but then again, he hadn't expected it to be. He had spent his whole life building an image of who Alex was, an image that was now slowly crumbling as he realized that the man in front of him wasn't the monster he had imagined. "Okay," Ryan said finally, his voice quiet but firm. "We can try." Alex's face lit up with a mixture of relief and gratitude. "Thank you, Ryan. I won't let you down." Ryan nodded, though there was still a part of him that remained cautious. He wasn't ready to fully trust Alex yet, but he was willing to take the first step, and for now, that was enough. Days passed after Ryan's second meeting with Alex, and although their conversation had left Ryan feeling more open to the idea of a relationship with his father, it had also created a new tension in his life. Chloe, who had always been Ryan's rock, was growing increasingly worried. She had seen the toll this situation was taking on her son, and despite her warnings, she knew Ryan was determined to navigate this on his own terms. Chloe, however, wasn't content to sit by and watch in silence. She had given Alex years of space, staying away and allowing him to live his life while she and Ryan struggled to make ends meet. But now that Alex had reappeared, she couldn't shake the feeling that he might hurt Ryan again, perhaps not intentionally, but in a way that could break the fragile peace they had built over the years. It was time for her to confront the man who had caused so much pain. One crisp autumn afternoon, Chloe found herself standing in front of the imposing Graham Enterprises building. The towering glass structure reflected the clear blue sky above, and Chloe could feel her heart pounding as she looked up at it. She hadn't set foot near Alex's world in over 2 decades, and now, here she was, about to step directly into the lion's den. Taking a deep breath, she entered the building. The lobby was sleek and modern, bustling with well-dressed professionals moving from one important task to the next. Chloe's presence was a stark contrast to the polished world around her. She was dressed simply, her worn coat a reminder of the life she had built far away from Alex's wealth and power. "May I help you?" a receptionist asked, her tone polite but formal. "I'm here to see Alex Graham," Chloe said, her voice steady despite the nerves bubbling inside her. "Do you have an appointment?" the receptionist asked, glancing at her computer. Chloe shook her head. "No, but he'll want to see me. Tell him it's Chloe Summers." The receptionist raised an eyebrow, clearly skeptical, but after a brief pause, she picked up the phone and made a call. Chloe stood there, her heart racing, wondering if Alex would even agree to see her. Part of her had hoped he would refuse. It would make things simpler, but she knew that deep down, this confrontation had been a long time coming. "Mr. Graham will see you," the receptionist said, a hint of surprise in her voice. "Take the elevator to the 25th floor." Chloe nodded her thanks and stepped into the elevator. As the doors closed and the numbers ticked upward, she tried to steady her breathing. She needed to stay calm, to keep her emotions in check. This wasn't just about her, it was about Ryan. She was here to protect her son, to make sure Alex understood the consequences of his actions. When the elevator doors opened, Chloe was greeted by another sleek, modern office space. A woman who appeared to be Alex's assistant led her through a series of glass-walled offices until they reached the large corner office at the end of the hall. Alex stood by the window, his back to the door as he looked out over the city. When Chloe stepped into the room, he turned to face her. For a moment, their eyes met, and time seemed to stand still. It was the first time they had seen each other in over 20 years, but the memories of their brief relationship came rushing back in an instant. "Chloe," Alex said, his voice softer than she expected. He gestured toward the chair in front of his desk. "Please, sit." Chloe remained standing, her arms crossed. "I didn't come here to sit down, Alex. I came here because we need to talk." Alex sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I figured this was coming," he said. "I know you're worried about Ryan, but I'm trying to make things right." Chloe's eyes narrowed. "Make things right? You think showing up after 2 decades and offering a few apologies is going to make up for what you did?" "I'm not trying to erase the past, Chloe," Alex replied, his tone calm but serious. "I know I messed up. I've admitted that to Ryan. But I want to be a part of his life now. Why now? Chloe demanded, her voice rising. Why, after all these years, do you suddenly care about being in his life? Is it guilt, or is it just another way to soothe your conscience? Alex stepped closer, his expression conflicted. It's not about my conscience. I've always regretted leaving you and Ryan, but I was too much of a coward to face it. When I saw him at the gala, when I realized who he was, something inside me shifted. I don't want to keep running from this. Chloe shook her head, her frustration bubbling to the surface. You don't get to just shift now, Alex. I raised Ryan on my own. I sacrificed everything for him. And you, her voice cracked with emotion, you just walked away. Alex's face tightened, and for the first time, Chloe saw real pain in his eyes. I know, he said quietly. And I hate myself for it. Do you? Chloe challenged, her voice laced with bitterness. Because it seems to me like you've done just fine without us. You built your empire, lived your life, and now, suddenly, you're ready to play the role of a father. Alex's eyes softened, but his voice remained firm. I didn't build this empire without consequences, Chloe. I've lost things along the way, important things. And yes, I was selfish. But I'm not the same man I was back then. Chloe scoffed, not entirely convinced. And what does that mean for Ryan? Do you expect him to just welcome you into his life like none of this ever happened? No, Alex admitted, his voice filled with regret. I know it's not that simple, but I'm willing to work for it. I want to earn his trust, his respect. I want to be there for him, however I can. Chloe took a deep breath, trying to steady her emotions. And I don't want you hurting him, Alex. Ryan's a good kid, he's strong, but he's been through enough. If you're not serious about this, if you're just doing it to ease your guilt, I need you to walk away. Now. Alex stepped closer, his eyes pleading. I'm not walking away this time, Chloe. I know I don't deserve a second chance, but I'm asking for one. For Ryan's sake. Chloe studied him for a long moment, her heart torn. She wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that he had changed. But the years of abandonment, the pain she had endured raising Ryan on her own, made it hard to let go of her anger. If you hurt him again, Chloe said, her voice cold and steady, I will never forgive you. Alex nodded solemnly. I understand. For the first time since she had arrived, Chloe felt some of the tension in her chest begin to ease. She had said what needed to be said. Now it was up to Alex to prove that he was serious about being in Ryan's life. I hope for Ryan's sake that you're telling the truth, Chloe said quietly. But I'm warning you, Alex, don't make promises you can't keep. With that, Chloe turned and walked out of the office, leaving Alex standing alone, his face etched with the weight of everything that had been said. He knew he had a long way to go before he could even begin to repair the damage he had caused. But as Chloe's words echoed in his mind, one thing was clear. This was his last chance, and he wasn't going to waste it. The weeks following Chloe's confrontation with Alex passed uneasily. Ryan noticed the tension in his mother, but she hadn't told him about the conversation. Chloe had always been protective, and although Ryan appreciated it, he felt an ever-growing need to make decisions about Alex for himself. Despite the warning Chloe had given Alex, Ryan continued to meet with his father, cautiously letting him into his life. Their interactions were tentative at first, with both men navigating unfamiliar territory. But as time passed, Ryan began to see sides of Alex that he hadn't expected, sides that made him question everything Chloe had told him. One afternoon, as Ryan sat across from Alex in a quiet cafe, he found himself feeling conflicted. They had been discussing law, one of the few topics where they seemed to connect easily. Alex had shared stories from his early days, building his business, negotiating deals with an intensity that mirrored the ambition Ryan recognized in himself. You know, Alex said with a smile, you've got the same drive I had when I was your age. It's impressive. I see a lot of myself in you. Ryan wasn't sure how to feel about that. A compliment from Alex, his estranged father, felt like validation, but it also made him uneasy. He had spent his entire life idolizing Chloe for her strength, and now here was Alex, painting a different picture of what success could look like. "I've been thinking about that a lot," Ryan admitted, his voice steady but thoughtful. "About how much of you is in me." Alex raised an eyebrow, his expression growing more serious. "And does that worry you?" Ryan leaned back in his chair, his gaze flickering toward the window. "It does. I don't know if I want to be like you. I've spent most of my life hating you for what you did." Alex's face tightened, and he leaned forward, his voice lower. "Ryan, I know I made mistakes, and I know it's hard to forgive someone who wasn't there for you, but we're not defined by our pasts. You don't have to be me. You can take the good parts and leave the rest behind." Ryan absorbed Alex's words, his mind torn between the man sitting in front of him and the years of pain Alex had caused by walking away. But what if Alex was right? What if people weren't just the sum of their worst mistakes? The conversation shifted as Alex changed the subject, steering them towards something lighter. But Ryan's thoughts stayed with the tension between who his father was and who he was becoming. That night, back at the apartment, Ryan couldn't shake his conflicting emotions. He sat at the kitchen table, lost in thought, when Chloe walked in, noticing the troubled look on his face. "Everything okay?" she asked, sitting down across from him. Ryan hesitated before responding. "I've been spending more time with Alex," he confessed, watching for Chloe's reaction. Chloe's expression didn't change, but Ryan saw the flicker of concern in her eyes. "I figured," she said quietly. "You're an adult, Ryan. I can't stop you from seeing him." "But you don't trust him," Ryan said, reading the unease in her voice. Chloe let out a soft sigh. "It's not that I don't trust you, Ryan. I know Alex, and I know how easy it is to get drawn in by his charm." Ryan frowned, frustration creeping into his voice. "You make him sound like some kind of villain. He's been trying, Mom. He wants to be part of my life. Why is that so hard for you to accept?" Chloe closed her eyes for a moment, trying to steady her emotions. "Because I've seen this before," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "He promises things, he says all the right words, but when it comes time to follow through, he's never there." Ryan felt a surge of anger. He had spent years believing Chloe's version of events, but now, after spending time with Alex, he was beginning to doubt the story he had been told. Was it possible that Chloe had been wrong, or worse, had she been lying to him? "I just don't know if it's that simple," Ryan said quietly, his words laced with uncertainty. "You've been holding on to the past for so long, and I get it. He hurt you. But maybe things are different now. Maybe he's different." Chloe looked at her son, her heart breaking as she saw the confusion in his eyes. She wanted to protect him from Alex's lies, from the pain she knew he was destined to face if he trusted Alex too easily. But she also knew that Ryan had to make his own choices she couldn't control. "Just be careful," Chloe whispered, her voice filled with emotion. "Please, I don't want you to get hurt the way I did." Ryan nodded, though his heart was heavy. He stood up from the table, his mind swirling with questions he didn't yet know how to answer. The next morning, Ryan woke up with a new determination. He needed answers, real answers, not just the carefully crafted narratives his parents had been feeding him. If he was going to figure out what kind of man Alex really was, he needed to look beyond the words. He needed to see the truth for himself. Ryan spent hours digging through public records, reading everything he could find about Alex's past. He combed through news articles, business reports, even old interviews. At first, it was just routine information, Alex's rise in the business world, his corporate achievements. But then, buried deep in an old news report from years ago, Ryan found something that made his blood run cold. The article was from a small local paper, dated just a few months after Ryan had been born. It detailed a legal battle between Alex and an unnamed woman who had sued him for child support. The article didn't name Chloe directly, but Ryan knew immediately that it had to be her. What shocked him most, however, wasn't the lawsuit itself. It was the fact that Alex had fought it. Ryan's hands shook as he read the details. According to the article, Alex had denied paternity at first, claiming that Chloe had been trying to trap him with the pregnancy. He had eventually settled out of court, but the damage had been done. The man who was now trying to make amends had once gone to great lengths to avoid any responsibility for his son. Ryan sat back in his chair, his heart pounding. Why hadn't Chloe ever told him about this? Had she kept it from him to protect him? Or had she been trying to shield him from the ugly truth about Alex? His mind raced as he replayed all of his recent conversations with Alex, trying to reconcile the image of the man who now wanted to be part of his life with the man who had once tried to deny his very existence. Ryan knew he needed to confront Alex, but this time it wouldn't be a calm conversation. He needed to hear the truth from his father, and he wasn't going to accept any more excuses. The following afternoon, Ryan found himself standing in front of Graham Enterprises once again, his heart heavy with anger and betrayal. He had texted Alex earlier, asking to meet, but he hadn't given any indication of what he had discovered. He wanted Alex to explain himself without any chance to craft a rehearsed response. As Ryan entered the building and made his way to Alex's office, the tension in his chest grew. He was no longer the confused, uncertain son seeking answers. He was someone who had been lied to, manipulated, and he wasn't going to let it happen again. Alex greeted Ryan with a warm smile when he entered the office, but Ryan didn't return it. He walked in, his expression cold, and sat down across from Alex without saying a word. Alex's smile faltered as he noticed Ryan's demeanor. "Ryan, what's going on?" Ryan didn't waste any time. "I found the article," he said flatly. "The one about you denying you were my father, about the lawsuit." Alex's face went pale, and for a moment he seemed at a loss for words. "Ryan, that was a long time ago." "Don't," Ryan interrupted, his voice filled with controlled anger. "Don't tell me it was a long time ago. You lied to me. You told me you regretted leaving, that you wanted to make things right, but you fought her. You tried to walk away from us." Alex's face tightened, and he leaned forward, his voice pleading. "Ryan, listen to me. I was scared. I was young, and I made stupid, selfish decisions. I didn't know how to handle any of it, but that doesn't mean I don't regret it." Ryan stared at him, his heart aching with the weight of the betrayal. "You didn't just make stupid decisions, Alex. You fought to keep me out of your life. You're the reason Mom had to do all of this alone. And now you expect me to just forgive you." Alex's eyes filled with regret. But Ryan wasn't ready to let go of his anger. He had spent too long wondering why his father had abandoned him, and now that he had the truth, it hurt more than he could have ever imagined. "I don't know if I can ever forgive you," Ryan said quietly, his voice trembling. "You weren't just absent, you made it impossible for us. And now you think you can walk back into my life and make things right. It's not that simple." Alex opened his mouth to respond, but Ryan stood up before he could say anything. "I need time to think," Ryan said, his voice cold. "Don't contact me for a while. I'll reach out when I'm ready." Without waiting for Alex's response, Ryan turned and walked out of the office, his mind racing. He had come here seeking answers, and now that he had them, they felt like a heavy burden on his heart. Ryan left Alex's office with a storm of emotions swirling inside him. He had thought that reconnecting with his father would bring clarity, answers, maybe even closure. Instead, it had left him feeling more conflicted than ever. The revelation that Alex had not only abandoned them, but had also fought to distance himself, legally cut deeper than anything Ryan had expected. It wasn't just the absence of a father, it was an active rejection, a conscious decision to walk away and leave Chloe to handle everything alone. As Ryan walked the streets of Manhattan, the bustling city around him seemed distant and unimportant. His mind was replaying the details of the lawsuit he had uncovered, the way Alex had tried to deny responsibility, the coldness of the legal battle that Chloe had never told him about. Why had she kept this from him? Was she trying to protect him from the ugly truth? Or had she believed that sparing him the details would make things easier? By the time Ryan reached his apartment, the anger inside him had reached a boiling point. He needed answers, and this time, those answers had to come from Chloe. When Chloe came home from work that evening, she could sense something was off the moment she walked through the door. Ryan was sitting at the kitchen table, his expression dark, his body tense. Chloe's heart sank as she realized that this confrontation had been coming for a while. She had known that once Ryan began to dig into his past, the truth would surface, and there would be no avoiding the difficult conversation that followed. "Ryan," Chloe asked cautiously, setting her bag down on the counter. "What's going on?" Ryan looked up at her, his eyes filled with hurt and anger. "Drakish, why didn't you tell me?" he demanded, his voice sharp. "Why didn't you tell me about the lawsuit, about how Alex tried to deny I was his son?" Chloe's face paled, and she took a deep breath, bracing herself for what was about to come. She had dreaded this moment, the day when Ryan would learn the full truth about his father's betrayal. "I didn't think you needed to know that part," Chloe said softly, her voice laced with regret. "And I was trying to protect you." "Protect me from what?" Ryan shot back, standing up from the table. "The truth, that my father didn't just walk away. He fought to keep us out of his life. I deserved to know, Mom." Chloe closed her eyes for a moment, the weight of the years pressing down on her. "You were just a baby, Ryan," she said, her voice trembling. "You were so innocent, and I didn't want you to grow up with that kind of bitterness. I wanted you to believe that maybe, someday, he could be different." Ryan shook his head, his anger barely contained. "But he wasn't different, was he? He abandoned us, and you covered for him. You let me believe that maybe there was a reason, that maybe he wasn't the monster I thought he was." "I wasn't covering for him," Chloe said, her voice pleading. "I was trying to give you the chance to make up your own mind about him when you were ready. I didn't want my anger to poison your feelings about him." "But it wasn't just your anger, was it?" Ryan countered, his voice rising. "You were protecting yourself too. You didn't want to relive the pain of what he did, so you buried it. And you left me in the dark." Tears welled in Chloe's eyes, but she didn't deny it. "Maybe you're right," she said quietly. "Maybe I was trying to protect myself too. But everything I did, Ryan, it was for you. I didn't want you to carry the weight of what happened between me and Alex. I wanted you to have a chance to figure things out without the burden of our past." Ryan's jaw tightened as he processed her words. He had always trusted Chloe, always believed that she had done everything in her power to raise him the best way she could. But now, in the wake of these new revelations, he couldn't help but feel betrayed. Chloe had kept vital parts of his story from him, and in doing so, she had allowed him to build a false narrative of his life. "You should have told me the truth," Ryan said, his voice cold. "I needed to know who he really was." Chloe wiped at her eyes, her heart breaking as she watched her son struggle with the pain of this betrayal. "I'm sorry, Ryan. I'm so sorry. I never wanted to hurt you." Ryan didn't respond immediately. He stood there, the silence between them heavy with years of unspoken emotions. Chloe could see the conflict in his eyes, the love he still had for her mixed with the anger at the secrets she had kept. "I don't know how to feel right now," Ryan said finally, his voice low and shaky. "Everything I thought I knew about my life, it's all wrong." Chloe took a tentative step toward him, wanting to reach out and comfort him, but unsure if he would even let her. "You still have me, Ryan," she whispered. "I've always been here for you, and I always will be." Ryan looked at her, his eyes filled with a mix of emotions she couldn't decipher. "I need some space," he said quietly, stepping back. "I need to figure things out on my own." Chloe's heart sank, but she nodded. "Okay," she said softly. "Take whatever time you need. I'll be here when you're ready." With that, Ryan grabbed his jacket and left the apartment, leaving Chloe standing alone in the quiet kitchen, her heart heavy with guilt and regret. For the next few days, Ryan kept his distance. He spent hours walking the streets of New York, trying to process everything he had learned. His world had been turned upside down, and he wasn't sure how to put the pieces back together. The father he had longed to know was not just absent. He had actively tried to erase them from his life, and the mother who had been his constant source of strength had hidden the full truth from him, leaving him to discover it on his own. Ryan didn't know who to trust anymore, or even how to trust his own feelings. Part of him wanted to cut both of his parents out of his life, to start fresh and build something that wasn't tainted by the lies and betrayal of the past. But another part of him, the part that still craved connection, that still wanted to believe people could change, wasn't ready to walk away completely. One evening, Ryan found himself at a park near the edge of the city, sitting on a bench as the sun began to set. The cool autumn air brushed against his face, and for the first time in days, he allowed himself to breathe deeply, to let go of the anger that had been building inside him. He pulled out his phone, scrolling through his contacts until he found Alex's number. His finger hovered over the screen, hesitating. After everything he had learned, after all the pain and betrayal, was there even a point in continuing to try with Alex? Could he ever forgive him for what he had done? Ryan closed his eyes, feeling the weight of the decision pressing down on him. He knew that walking away from Alex completely would be easier in some ways. It would be clean, simple, but it would also leave a void, an unanswered question that would haunt him for the rest of his life. Finally, Ryan made his decision. He pressed the call button, his heart pounding as the phone rang on the other end. After a few moments, Alex's voice came through the line. "Ryan." Alex's voice sounded hesitant, unsure. Ryan took a deep breath. "Oh, we need to talk," he said quietly, his voice steady but filled with the weight of everything that had happened. "This time, I want the whole truth." There was a pause on the other end of the line, and Ryan could almost feel Alex's tension through the phone. "Okay," Alex said finally, his voice serious. "Whatever you want to know, I'll tell you." Ryan nodded, even though Alex couldn't see him. "Tomorrow," Ryan said. "Let's meet tomorrow." As he ended the call, Ryan felt a strange sense of calm wash over him. He wasn't sure what the future held, or if he would ever be able to forgive Alex for what he had done. But for the first time in days, he felt like he was taking control of his own story. Tomorrow, he would face the truth, whatever it turned out to be. The next morning, Ryan woke up early, his mind still heavy from the emotional whirlwind of the past few days. He hadn't slept much, tossing and turning as he tried to make sense of everything that had happened. Today, he was meeting Alex again, but this time, Ryan wasn't going in blind. He was determined to get the full truth, no more half explanations or evasions. He needed to know everything if he was going to figure out how, or even if, Alex fit into his life. As he made his way to the cafe where they had agreed to meet, Ryan felt a strange mix of anticipation and dread. This conversation would be different. There would be no hiding from the painful facts of the past, no skirting around the details. Ryan needed answers, and he wasn't going to let Alex avoid them any longer. When he arrived at the cafe, Alex was already there, seated at a table in the corner. He looked nervous, which was a rare sight for someone like him, someone who usually exuded confidence. Alex stood up when he saw Ryan approach, offering a tentative smile, but Ryan didn't return it. He wasn't here for pleasantries. "Morning," Alex said, his voice careful as Ryan sat down. Ryan nodded, his expression serious. "Let's get straight to the point. I want the truth, all of it." Alex's face tightened, and for a moment he looked as though he was preparing himself for a fight, but then he sighed and leaned back in his chair, nodding. "You're right. I owe you the full story." Ryan crossed his arms, waiting. "It all started when Chloe told me she was pregnant," Alex began, his voice steady but laced with regret. "At the time, I was in the middle of growing my business. I was focused, ambitious, and honestly, I didn't think I had room in my life for a child. When Chloe told me, I panicked. I said things I shouldn't have, made decisions I'll regret for the rest of my life." Ryan's jaw clenched. He had heard this part before, but now he needed the details, the ones Alex had avoided during their previous conversations. After I told her I couldn't be part of your life, she took me to court. Alex continued, his voice quieter now. I was scared. I thought if I admitted responsibility, it would ruin everything I had built. So I fought it. I tried to deny that you were mine. Ryan felt a surge of anger, his fists tightening at his sides. You didn't just walk away, he said through gritted teeth. You tried to erase us. Alex's face was filled with guilt, but he didn't argue. I did, and it was wrong. I thought I could separate my personal life from everything else, that I could just move on and pretend it never happened, but it doesn't work like that. Ryan's chest tightened, the weight of the revelation pressing down on him. He had spent years feeling abandoned, but knowing that Alex had actively tried to distance himself from them, it was almost too much to bear. Why? Ryan asked, his voice cracking with emotion. Why did you fight so hard to push us away? Alex closed his eyes for a moment, as if trying to find the right words. When he opened them again, they were filled with regret, because I was scared. Scared of failing as a father, scared of what it would mean for my career. I thought if I could just keep you and Chloe out of my life, I could stay in control. Ryan stared at his father, disbelief and pain swirling inside him. You thought you could control your life by pretending I didn't exist. I know how it sounds, Alex said, his voice strained. But at the time, it made sense to me. I was selfish, Ryan. I was too focused on my own success to see what I was losing. Ryan's mind raced, trying to reconcile the man sitting in front of him with the image of his father he had carried for so long. And what about now? Ryan asked, his voice filled with skepticism. Why do you care now? What changed? Alex hesitated for a moment before speaking. You did, he said quietly. When I saw you at that gala, I saw a young man who had grown up without me, and I realized what I had missed. I realized how much I had failed you. I don't expect you to forgive me, Ryan, but I'm trying. I'm trying to make up for the time we lost. Ryan felt a lump forming in his throat, but he swallowed it down. He had spent his entire life without Alex, and now, after all this time, he wasn't sure if he could just let him back in. You've missed everything, Ryan said, his voice low. You missed all the hard parts, all the sacrifices Mom made. You don't get to just show up now and act like you can make it better. Alex nodded, his eyes filled with sadness. I know I can't make it better, but I want to be here for you now, however you'll let me. Ryan sat back, his emotions warring inside him. Part of him wanted to believe Alex, to give him the chance he was asking for. But the other part, the part that had spent years living with the consequences of Alex's choices, wasn't sure he could ever forgive him. I don't know if I can do this, Ryan admitted, his voice shaking. I've spent my whole life wondering why you didn't want me, and now that I know, it's worse than I thought. Alex's face fell, and for a moment, the silence between them was heavy with everything left unsaid. I don't expect you to forgive me right away, Alex said quietly, but I'm not giving up. I'll keep showing up, even if it takes years for you to let me in. I'm not walking away again. Ryan looked at his father, searching his face for any sign of deception, but all he saw was a man who seemed genuinely remorseful, a man who had made terrible mistakes but was trying to make amends. It wasn't enough to erase the past, but it was something. I need time, Ryan said finally, his voice steady but distant. I don't know if I can ever forgive you, but I need time to figure it out. Alex nodded slowly, accepting the distance Ryan was putting between them. Take as much time as you need. I'll be here. Ryan stood up, ready to leave. His mind was still spinning from the conversation, and he wasn't sure how to process everything he had just learned. But as he walked away from the cafe, one thing was clear. He couldn't keep running from the truth. He had to face it, no matter how painful it was. That evening, Ryan found himself back at his apartment, sitting on the couch and staring blankly at the wall. He had told Alex he needed time, but the truth was, he didn't know how much time it would take to heal the wounds of the past. Could he ever truly forgive Alex for what he had done? Or was their relationship doomed from the start? Chloe entered the room, sensing the weight of Ryan's thoughts. She sat down beside him, her presence comforting but quiet. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. They had been through so much together, and yet this new chapter with Alex was tearing at the bond they had built. "How did it go?" Chloe asked gently, breaking the silence. Ryan let out a deep breath, his eyes filled with uncertainty. "He told me everything about the lawsuit, about how he tried to deny I was his son." Chloe's face tightened, and she reached for Ryan's hand, squeezing it gently. "I'm so sorry, Ryan. I didn't want you to find out like this." "It's not your fault," Ryan said, though his voice was still filled with the pain of betrayal. I don't know what to do now." Chloe's eyes softened, and she looked at her son with the same love and care that had guided her through years of sacrifice. "Whatever you decide, Ryan, it's your choice. You don't owe him anything. But if you think there's even a small chance for healing, don't shut the door completely. You deserve to find peace, whatever that looks like." Ryan nodded, his heart heavy with indecision. He wasn't sure what peace looked like, not yet, but he knew that whatever happened, he couldn't let Alex's mistakes define him any longer. As he sat there with his mother, the woman who had given him everything, Ryan realized that the road ahead would be difficult. Forgiveness wasn't a destination, it was a process. And for the first time, Ryan was willing to take the first step, even if he didn't know where it would lead. The days after Ryan's conversation with Alex passed slowly, weighed down by the emotional turmoil that now dominated his thoughts. He had learned the ugly truth about his father's past actions, but it didn't bring the clarity he had hoped for. Instead, Ryan felt more conflicted than ever. Could he ever truly forgive Alex for what he had done? And if he couldn't, what would that mean for his future relationship with his father and with Chloe? Ryan tried to focus on his daily routine, but it was impossible to shake the tension that hung over everything. He had told Alex he needed time, but he wasn't sure how much time would be enough to heal the wounds of the past. Ryan had always thought of himself as strong, capable of overcoming anything, but this situation had left him feeling vulnerable and uncertain. Meanwhile, Chloe was walking on eggshells around Ryan, unsure of how to help him navigate this difficult chapter. She could see the pain in his eyes, the way he struggled to reconcile his feelings for Alex. But Chloe also knew that this was something Ryan had to figure out on his own. No matter how much she wanted to protect him, she couldn't shield him from the complicated emotions that came with facing the truth about his father. One evening, after a long day at work, Ryan returned home to find Chloe sitting in the living room, flipping through an old photo album. It was filled with pictures of Ryan as a child, birthdays, school events, moments of happiness captured in time. Chloe looked up as Ryan entered the room, her expression soft but worried. "I was just going through some old memories," Chloe said, gesturing to the album. It feels like so much has changed since then." Ryan sat down across from her, his eyes flickering to the pictures of his younger self. There was a time when his world had felt simple, just him and Chloe, making the best of what they had. Now, everything felt complicated. "Do you ever wish things had been different?" Ryan asked quietly, his voice heavy with uncertainty. Chloe looked at him thoughtfully before answering. "Of course I do," she said softly. "Das, I wish things had been easier for us, that you hadn't had to grow up without a father, but I also know that we've built something strong, just the two of us. No matter what happens, that will never change." Ryan nodded, but he didn't feel reassured. "It's just hard," he admitted, his voice cracking slightly. "I spent my whole life wondering about him, and now that I know the truth, I don't know if I can ever let him in." Chloe's heart ached for her son. She knew how much this was tearing him apart. "You don't have to decide anything right now, Ryan," she said gently. "There's no timeline for forgiveness." "I just don't want to make the wrong decision," Ryan said, his voice filled with frustration. "What if I try to let him in and he hurts me again? Or what if I shut him out and end up regretting it?" Chloe reached across the table, placing her hand over his. Whatever choice you make, it has to be the one that feels right for you. I know Alex has caused a lot of pain, but you're the one who gets to decide what kind of relationship you want with him, if any." Ryan sighed, leaning back in his chair. "I don't know what I want," he admitted. "I'm just lost." Chloe didn't have an easy answer for him. All she could do was offer her support, knowing that Ryan's journey with Alex was something he had to figure out for himself. As the weeks went by, Ryan and Alex continued to stay in touch, though their relationship remained strained. Ryan kept his distance emotionally, unsure of how much to trust his father's newfound commitment to being part of his life. Alex, for his part, seemed determined to prove that he was serious about making amends. He texted Ryan frequently, offering to meet up or help in any way he could, but Ryan rarely took him up on it. One afternoon, Ryan received an unexpected invitation from Alex. It wasn't just a casual request to grab coffee. It was an invitation to attend a company event, a formal gathering of influential business figures, much like the gala where they had first crossed paths. Alex framed it as an opportunity for Ryan to see more of his world, to understand the life he had built. Ryan was hesitant, but something about the invitation intrigued him. He had always been curious about the life Alex had led, and maybe, just maybe, this would give him a better sense of who his father really was. After days of contemplation, Ryan decided to accept the invitation. He didn't tell Chloe about it. He wasn't ready for another emotional conversation. Instead, he kept it to himself, wanting to experience this new side of Alex's life on his own terms. The night of the event arrived, and Ryan found himself once again standing outside one of New York's most prestigious venues. He adjusted the suit jacket he had borrowed from a friend, feeling a mix of excitement and anxiety. This wasn't his world. He had grown up far from the glitz and glamour that surrounded him now, but part of him was curious to see where Alex fit into it all. When Ryan entered the venue, he was immediately struck by the opulence of it all. Chandeliers sparkled from the ceiling, and waiters moved gracefully through the crowd, offering champagne to the well-dressed guests. Alex was already there, talking with a group of colleagues. But when he saw Ryan, his face lit up with genuine warmth. "Ryan?" Alex said, walking over to greet him. "I'm so glad you could make it." Ryan nodded, still feeling slightly out of place. "I wasn't sure if I would come," he admitted. "But I figured it was worth seeing what this part of your life is like." Alex smiled, gesturing to the room around them. "This has been my world for a long time. But it's not everything, Ryan. There's more to life than just business." Ryan looked around, taking in the scene. It was clear that Alex thrived in this environment. He was comfortable, confident, completely in his element. But for Ryan, it felt foreign, almost surreal. He couldn't help but wonder how different his life would have been if Alex had been a part of it from the beginning. As the evening went on, Ryan observed Alex from a distance. He watched as his father mingled with business associates, effortlessly navigating the world of wealth and power. Alex was charming, charismatic, and undeniably successful, but there was something about it all that didn't sit right with Ryan. It felt hollow, as though Alex had spent his entire life building an empire that ultimately meant nothing. At one point, Alex pulled Ryan aside, his expression serious. "I want you to know something," Alex said quietly. "I didn't invite you here to impress you or to show off. I invited you because I want you to understand that this," he gestured around the room, "none of this means anything to me if I don't have a relationship with you." Ryan stared at him, unsure of what to say. He had spent so long resenting Alex for his wealth and success, for building a life without him and Chloe. But now, standing here in the middle of it all, Ryan realized that maybe Alex wasn't as fulfilled by his empire as he had once thought. "I've made mistakes," Alex continued, his voice low but earnest. "But I want to be part of your life, Ryan. Not because of what I have or what I've built, but because you're my son. That's what matters most to me now." Ryan felt a lump form in his throat. He had never imagined hearing those words from Alex. For so long, he had believed that Alex's success had come at the expense of their relationship, that Alex had chosen his career over being a father. But now, for the first time, Ryan saw a glimpse of the man Alex was trying to be, a man who, despite his past mistakes, wanted to make things right. "I don't know if I'm ready for that," Ryan admitted, his voice soft. "But I appreciate you being honest." Alex nodded, understanding the hesitation in Ryan's voice. "Take your time. I'm not going anywhere." Later that night, after the event had ended, Ryan walked through the quiet streets of Manhattan, his mind racing with thoughts of the evening. Seeing Alex in his world had been eye-opening, but it hadn't given Ryan the answers he had hoped for. Instead, it had only deepened his confusion about what kind of relationship he wanted with his father. When Ryan returned home, Chloe was sitting in the living room, reading. She looked up as he entered, sensing the tension in his demeanor. "Everything okay?" Chloe asked, her voice filled with concern. Ryan hesitated for a moment before answering. "I went to one of Alex's events tonight," he admitted, unsure of how she would react. Chloe's face tightened slightly, but she didn't say anything right away. After a moment, she nodded. "And how was it?" "It was different," Ryan said, sitting down across from her. "It made me realize that maybe he's not the person I thought he was, or at least, he's trying not to be." Chloe studied her son's face, her heart aching as she saw the conflict in his eyes. "You don't have to decide anything tonight, Ryan," she said softly. "Just take it one step at a time." Ryan nodded, grateful for her understanding. But deep down, he knew that this wasn't just about taking things one step at a time. It was about deciding who he wanted to be, and whether that included his father. The growing tension in Ryan's life felt like an invisible wall separating him from everything he had once been sure of. His relationship with Alex was still in a fragile state, one he wasn't sure could ever truly heal. But what troubled Ryan even more was the effect all of this was having on Chloe. She had always been his anchor, the person who raised him alone, and now Ryan felt the weight of guilt pulling at him for even considering letting Alex back into his life. One evening, as Ryan sat on the couch in the dim light of the living room, Chloe entered quietly. She'd been quieter than usual, and Ryan could tell that she'd been carrying her own emotional burden. The strain of everything, the resurfacing of Alex, Ryan's conflicted feelings, was starting to show in her. "Mom, we need to talk," Ryan said gently, looking up at her. Chloe nodded, sitting down next to him. "I've been waiting for you to say that." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The silence between them was thick with the unsaid words that had been building over the past few weeks. "I don't know what to do about Alex," Ryan admitted, his voice heavy. "He says he wants to make things right, that he regrets everything, but I don't know if I can trust him, and I don't know if I should." Chloe's eyes softened, but there was also a flicker of something else, something that Ryan hadn't seen in her before, a mix of sadness and resignation. "I know this is hard for you, Ryan," she said quietly. And I know it's hard for me to see you struggling with it. I feel like I'm betraying you by even thinking about letting him back into my life," Ryan confessed, his voice thick with emotion. "You've done everything for me, and I can't help but feel like I'm turning my back on you." Chloe reached out, placing her hand on his. "Ryan, you're not betraying me. You're trying to figure out your own path, and that's okay. I've always wanted you to have the freedom to make your own decisions, even if they're hard." Ryan shook his head, his eyes filled with frustration. "But you don't trust him. You never have. How can I let him in when I know how much he hurt you?" Chloe sighed deeply, her expression tired. "It's true that I don't trust Alex. He's caused a lot of pain, and I can't forget that. But this isn't about me anymore. It's about you. You need to figure out what kind of relationship, if any, you want to have with him. I can't make that choice for you." Ryan's heart ached as he heard the weariness in Chloe's voice. She had carried so much for so long, her own heartache, her struggles as a single mother, and now the burden of watching her son try to reconcile with the man who had abandoned them both. He wanted to make things right, but he didn't know how. I just don't want to lose you, Ryan said softly, his voice cracking. Chloe smiled sadly, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. You're not going to lose me, Ryan. No matter what happens with Alex, I'm always going to be here for you. That's never going to change. Ryan nodded, but the uncertainty still gnawed at him. He had thought that bringing Alex into his life would answer the questions he had carried for so long, but instead, it had only raised more. The closer he got to his father, the further away he felt from the person he used to be. In the days that followed, Ryan found himself increasingly distant from both Chloe and Alex. He needed space, time to think about everything without the pressure of either of them pushing him one way or the other. He spent hours walking through the city, trying to clear his mind, but no matter how far he walked, the confusion followed him like a shadow. One afternoon, as Ryan sat in a small park near his apartment, his phone buzzed with a text from Alex. Alex, I've been thinking a lot about our last conversation. I want you to know that I'm here for you, no matter what. Whenever you're ready, we can talk again. Ryan stared at the message for a long time, his emotions swirling. He wasn't sure if he was ready to talk, but he also knew that avoiding the issue wasn't helping. He needed to confront this situation head-on, even if it meant facing more uncomfortable truths. A few days later, Ryan finally agreed to meet Alex again. This time, he chose a more private setting, a quiet cafe far from the bustling city, where they could talk without interruptions. When Ryan arrived, Alex was already there, looking anxious but hopeful. As Ryan sat down, the tension between them was palpable. I wasn't sure if you'd come, Alex admitted, his voice soft. Ryan shrugged, not ready to dive into pleasantries. I'm still not sure why I'm here. Alex nodded, understanding the weight of Ryan's words. I get it. This isn't easy for either of us. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Ryan stared down at the table, his thoughts racing. He had spent weeks trying to figure out what he wanted, but now, sitting across from Alex, he still didn't have any clear answers. You've said you regret what happened, Ryan began, his voice steady but firm. But I need to know what that actually means. You didn't just walk away. You fought to stay out of my life. Why should I believe that you've changed now? Alex leaned forward, his expression serious. Because I have changed, Ryan. I know I can't erase the past, but I've spent the last few years realizing what's really important. When I saw you at that gala, it was like everything I had been avoiding hit me all at once. I don't expect you to forgive me right away, but I'm trying to be a better man for you. Ryan shook his head, still skeptical. It's not that simple, Alex. You can't just show up now and expect everything to be okay. You missed my entire life. I know that, Alex said quietly, his eyes filled with regret. And I'm going to have to live with that for the rest of my life. But I'm here now, and I'm not going to walk away again. Ryan studied his father's face, searching for any signs of insincerity, but all he saw was a man who seemed genuinely remorseful, a man who wanted to make amends. Still, Ryan wasn't ready to fully trust him. I'm not asking you to forgive me today, Alex continued. I just want the chance to earn your trust, one step at a time. Whatever that looks like for you, I'm willing to do it. Ryan let out a deep breath, feeling the weight of his decision pressing down on him. He had spent his whole life hating Alex, resenting him for leaving, but now, for the first time, he saw a path forward, a path that, while painful, might offer the possibility of healing. And I don't know if I can ever fully trust you, Ryan admitted, his voice shaking slightly, but I'm willing to try. Slowly, Alex nodded, his eyes filled with gratitude. That's all I'm asking for. As Ryan left the cafe that afternoon, he felt a small sense of relief. He wasn't sure what the future held for him and Alex, but for the first time, he felt like they were moving in the right direction. It wouldn't be easy, and there would be setbacks along the way, but Ryan was willing to take the first step toward rebuilding something that had been broken for so long. Back at home, Chloe was waiting for him. her expression anxious as she watched him walk through the door. "How did it go?" she asked gently. Ryan sat down beside her, feeling emotionally drained but oddly hopeful. "It was okay. We talked, and I think we're finally getting somewhere." Chloe nodded, relief washing over her face. "I'm glad, Ryan. I just want you to find peace with all of this, whatever that looks like." Ryan leaned back, his mind still racing. He wasn't sure if peace was on the horizon, but for the first time in a long time, it felt like it was within reach. "I'm trying," Ryan said softly. "I'm really trying." Chloe smiled and wrapped her arm around him, pulling him close. "Good, that's all you can do." As Ryan sat there with Chloe, he realized that no matter what happened with Alex, he would always have the unconditional love and support of the person who had been there for him from the very beginning. And for now, that was enough. Weeks passed, and Ryan found himself slowly adjusting to the new reality of having Alex back in his life. It wasn't easy, and there were days when Ryan questioned whether he was making the right decision by allowing his father even a small place in his world. But something inside him, some deep-rooted need for closure, for understanding, kept him moving forward, one cautious step at a time. Chloe, as always, remained a constant source of support, but Ryan could tell the situation was taking a toll on her. She never said anything directly, but Ryan knew that every time he mentioned meeting with Alex, it stirred up old wounds for her. Chloe had spent years rebuilding her life after Alex left, and now, with him back in the picture, Ryan worried that she was reliving some of that pain. Despite the complexity of the situation, Ryan was determined to give Alex a chance. If nothing else, he needed to know that he had tried. But as Ryan spent more time with his father, something about Alex's world started to feel off. One afternoon, Ryan was at Alex's office, having agreed to join him for lunch after a brief tour of Graham Enterprises. The office was sleek and modern, the kind of place that exuded wealth and power. Ryan couldn't help but feel out of place in this environment, but he was trying to keep an open mind. As they sat in Alex's office, eating lunch and discussing business, Ryan noticed something strange. On the bookshelf behind Alex's desk, tucked between business journals and award plaques, was a small framed photograph. It was an old picture, faded with time, but Ryan recognized it instantly. It was a photo of Chloe, taken years ago, back when she and Alex had been together. She looked young, happy, so different from the woman Ryan knew now. Ryan's breath caught in his throat. "Why do you have that?" he asked, pointing to the photo. Alex turned to look at the picture, a shadow passing over his face. He set down his fork and leaned back in his chair, clearly taken off guard by the question. "I've had it for years," Alex said quietly. "I guess I just never got rid of it." Ryan frowned, his mind racing. "Why not? You left us. Why would you keep something like that?" Alex sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Because no matter what happened between me and your mother, I never stopped thinking about her. Or you." Ryan stared at the picture, feeling a mixture of emotions. It didn't make sense to him. Why would Alex keep a photo of Chloe if he had fought so hard to leave them behind? If he had tried to erase them from his life, why keep this small, intimate reminder of the family he had abandoned? "Did you ever regret leaving?" Ryan asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Alex's face softened, and he looked at Ryan with genuine sadness. "Every day," he admitted. "I was young, and I made terrible decisions, but I never stopped thinking about you or your mother. I just didn't know how to fix it." Ryan looked down, the weight of Alex's words pressing on him. He had always imagined that Alex had moved on without a second thought, but now he was hearing something different, something that made him question the narrative he had carried for so long. "I don't know what to think," Ryan said finally, his voice filled with frustration. "You say you regret it, but you stayed away for over 2 decades. How can I believe you?" Alex leaned forward, his expression earnest. "I know it's hard to believe, Ryan, but I didn't stay away because I didn't care. I stayed away because I was ashamed. I thought I had messed things up so badly that there was no way to fix it. And by the time I realized how wrong I was, it felt too late. Ryan's chest tightened, the conflict inside him growing stronger. He wanted to believe Alex, wanted to believe that his father had spent years regretting his decisions, but the pain of the past was still too fresh, too raw. "I don't know if I can ever forgive you," Ryan said quietly, his voice filled with uncertainty. "But I'm trying to understand." Alex nodded, his eyes filled with understanding. "That's all I can ask for." As Ryan left Alex's office that afternoon, he couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story. Something about Alex's sudden reappearance in his life didn't sit right with him, and the discovery of the old photograph only deepened his suspicions. Ryan had spent his whole life believing that Alex had walked away without looking back, but now he was starting to question whether things were as simple as they seemed. That night, Ryan sat in his apartment, staring at the ceiling as the events of the day played over in his mind. There were too many unanswered questions, too many pieces of the puzzle that didn't fit. Why had Alex kept that photo? Why had he stayed away for so long, only to suddenly want to make amends now? Ryan decided he needed answers, real answers. He couldn't keep living in this state of uncertainty, constantly questioning everything he had believed about his father. If Alex wasn't going to tell him the full truth, Ryan would have to find it himself. Over the next few days, Ryan began digging deeper into Alex's life, trying to find any clues that might explain his father's behavior. He searched through old records, scanned newspaper archives, and combed through public documents. At first, it seemed like he was hitting dead ends. There was nothing in Alex's past that stood out as particularly unusual. But then, after hours of searching, Ryan stumbled upon something that made his heart race. It was an old business document, buried deep in the archives of a financial news website. The document detailed a partnership that Alex had entered into over 20 years ago, around the time Ryan was born. The name of the partner caught Ryan's attention immediately: Evan Palmer. Ryan didn't recognize the name at first, but something about it felt familiar. He did a quick search and discovered that Evan Palmer was a well-known businessman, someone who had been involved in a number of high-profile deals over the years. But what stood out most to Ryan was the timing of the partnership. It had begun shortly after Alex and Chloe's relationship had ended, and it had continued for years, despite the fact that Evan and Alex appeared to have had a falling out at some point. Ryan's curiosity was piqued. Why hadn't Alex ever mentioned this partnership, and why had it ended so abruptly? Determined to get to the bottom of it, Ryan began digging deeper into Evan Palmer's background. The more he uncovered, the more unsettling the picture became. There were rumors of shady business dealings, whispers of corruption and manipulation behind the scenes. And then, buried in a report from years ago, Ryan found something that made his blood run cold. According to the report, Evan Palmer had been involved in a legal dispute with Alex, one that had ended in a massive settlement. The details were vague, but it seemed clear that the falling out between Alex and Evan had been serious. What was even more disturbing, however, was the fact that the dispute had centered around a personal matter, something that had never been made public. Ryan's heart raced as he pieced it together. Could it be possible that Alex's decision to leave Chloe and Ryan had been influenced by something more than just fear and selfishness? Had Evan Palmer played a role in pushing Alex out of their lives? Ryan didn't know for sure, but the more he thought about it, the more it made sense. If Alex had been involved in a messy business deal with someone like Evan Palmer, it could explain why he had stayed away for so long. Maybe Alex hadn't been running from his responsibilities as a father. Maybe he had been trying to protect them. The realization hit Ryan like a ton of bricks. If there was more to the story than he had ever known, he needed to confront Alex about it. But first, he needed to learn everything he could about Evan Palmer. That night, Ryan sat in front of his computer, researching Evan Palmer's connections to Alex and trying to piece together the truth. There were still so many unanswered questions. But one thing was clear: Ryan's past was far more complicated than he had ever imagined. He couldn't stop now. He had to keep digging, no matter where it led him. Ryan's discovery of Evan Palmer had shaken him to the core. The idea that Alex's decision to leave might have been influenced by something beyond his own fear and selfishness opened up a Pandora's box of questions. If Evan Palmer had truly played a role in the disintegration of their family, then the story Ryan had told himself his whole life about Alex walking away simply because he didn't care might not be the full truth. Determined to get to the bottom of things, Ryan spent the next few days diving deeper into the connection between Alex and Evan. It was slow work, but each new piece of information seemed to reveal a more complicated web of events. There were mentions of business deals that had gone south, rumors of financial manipulation, and whispers of personal betrayals that had never been made public. It all pointed to a messy, turbulent relationship between the two men. Ryan couldn't shake the feeling that whatever had happened between Alex and Evan had influenced his father's decision to abandon him and Chloe all those years ago. But the details were still murky, and Ryan knew that if he was going to get real answers, he would have to confront Alex directly. A few days later, Ryan arranged to meet Alex at a quiet restaurant in Midtown Manhattan. It was a more formal setting than usual, and Ryan's nerves were on edge. He had no idea how Alex would react to the information he had uncovered, but he couldn't keep the questions to himself any longer. When Alex arrived, he greeted Ryan with a warm smile, seemingly unaware of the storm brewing inside his son. They ordered drinks, exchanged pleasantries, but Ryan's mind was elsewhere, focused entirely on what he was about to reveal. "I need to ask you something," Ryan said finally, breaking the surface of their light conversation. His voice was steady, but there was a weight to it that made Alex sit up straighter, sensing the seriousness of the moment. "Of course," Alex said cautiously, his eyes narrowing slightly as he studied Ryan's expression. "What is it?" Ryan leaned forward, his gaze piercing. "I've been doing some research into your past, and I found something about a man named Evan Palmer. You worked with him around the time you left Mom, right?" Alex's face paled, and for a moment he said nothing. The air between them grew tense as Alex processed Ryan's words, his expression hardening. Where did you hear about Evan Palmer?" Alex asked quietly, his voice measured but with an unmistakable edge. "I found old business records," Ryan said, his voice firm. "It looks like you two were partners for a while, but things ended badly. And now I'm wondering, did he have something to do with why you left us?" Alex's jaw clenched, and he looked away for a moment, clearly unsettled by the direction of the conversation. When he finally turned back to Ryan, his expression was conflicted. "Evan Palmer is not someone I like to talk about," Alex said slowly. "But yes, we had a business partnership that went south, and yes, it did impact my decision to walk away. But it's more complicated than that." Ryan's heart raced as he listened, knowing he was finally on the verge of the truth. "What do you mean? How was it complicated?" Alex sighed deeply, running a hand through his hair as he tried to gather his thoughts. Evan wasn't just a business partner, he was ruthless, manipulative. He had a way of getting into people's heads, making them do things they didn't want to do. When I first got involved with him, I thought he was someone who could help me take my business to the next level. But it didn't take long for me to realize that he had his own agenda, and it wasn't in my best interest. Ryan's frown deepened. "What does that have to do with leaving us? Was Evan involved in that decision?" Alex hesitated for a moment before speaking again. "In a way, yes. Evan knew about you and Chloe. He knew that you were a complication in my life, and he used that against me. He convinced me that the only way to truly succeed in business, to get ahead in the world we were in, was to let go of anything that could be seen as a weakness. And at the time, I was desperate. I thought I had to prove myself, that I couldn't afford to be seen as vulnerable, so I listened to him." Ryan's stomach churned. "You let him convince you that we were a weakness?" Alex looked down, guilt etched across his face. I was weak, Ryan. I let him get inside my head, and I made the worst decision of my life, walking away from you and your mother. It wasn't just about fear. It was about trying to fit into a world that was all about power and control. I let Evan manipulate me into thinking that success meant cutting off the people who mattered most. Ryan clenched his fists under the table, his anger rising. So you sold us out for your career. You chose business over family because some corrupt partner convinced you it was the right thing to do. Alex shook his head, his voice thick with regret. It wasn't as simple as that. I knew I was making a mistake even as I was doing it. But once I made that choice, I felt like I couldn't go back. I felt trapped. By the time I realized how much I had lost, it was too late. Ryan stared at his father, a mixture of disbelief and anger swirling inside him. He had spent his whole life believing that Alex had left because he didn't care, because he had chosen selfishness over responsibility, and now he was learning that Alex's abandonment had been orchestrated, at least in part, by a manipulative business partner who had used their family as leverage in a power game. "Why didn't you tell me this sooner?" Ryan demanded, his voice trembling with frustration. "That you've been back in my life for months, and you never once mentioned Evan Palmer or how he manipulated you. Why keep this from me?" Alex looked pained, his eyes filled with remorse. "Because I didn't want to make excuses. I made my own decisions, and I didn't want to blame someone else for my mistakes. But you deserve the truth, Ryan. Evan was part of the reason I left, but the blame is mine. I'm the one who chose to listen to him." Ryan shook his head, his thoughts spinning. "You let him ruin everything." "I know," Alex said quietly, his voice thick with emotion, "and I regret it every single day." Ryan sat back in his chair, trying to process everything he had just heard. The revelation about Evan Palmer changed everything. It didn't absolve Alex of his responsibility, but it added a layer of complexity that Ryan hadn't expected. His father had been weak, manipulated by someone who saw their family as an obstacle to success. But in the end, Alex had still made the choice to walk away. "I don't know how to feel about any of this," Ryan said after a long pause. "I spent my whole life thinking you didn't care, that you just left because it was easier for you. But now..." Alex reached across the table, his eyes pleading. "I cared, Ryan. I cared more than you know. But I was young and stupid, and I let myself be influenced by the wrong people. I know I can't undo what's been done, but I want you to know that I'm not the same person I was back then." Ryan looked at his father, the man who had caused him so much pain, and felt a wave of conflicting emotions wash over him. He wasn't ready to forgive Alex, not yet, but he was starting to see that the story of their family wasn't as simple as he had once believed. There were layers of betrayal, manipulation, and regret that had shaped the decisions Alex had made. And now, Ryan had to decide what to do with that information. "I need time to process this," Ryan said quietly, his voice steady. "But I'm not walking away, not yet." Alex nodded, relief flooding his face. "Take all the time you need, Ryan. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." As Ryan left the restaurant that evening, his mind was still racing. He had uncovered a dark chapter of his family's history, but he knew there was more to learn. Evan Palmer had played a role in destroying his family, and Ryan wasn't going to rest until he uncovered the full truth. Ryan left the restaurant feeling emotionally drained, the weight of the revelations about Evan Palmer bearing down on him. He had spent years angry at Alex, believing his father's betrayal was born solely out of selfishness. Now, with the knowledge that another man, a manipulative business partner, had influenced Alex's decisions, Ryan's understanding of the past was beginning to shift. But despite everything Alex had told him, Ryan still felt unsettled. It wasn't enough to hear that Evan had played a role in breaking their family apart. Ryan needed more. He needed to understand the full extent of Evan's involvement. How had Evan managed to manipulate Alex so completely? And more importantly, was Evan still a threat? Over the next few days, Ryan couldn't shake the feeling that the story wasn't over yet. He dove deeper into researching Evan Palmer, trying to find any information that could help him understand who this man really was and why he had been so determined to drive a wedge between Alex and his family. It didn't take long for Ryan to uncover more troubling details about Evan's past. There were reports of unethical business practices, legal disputes, and even rumors of blackmail. The more Ryan read, the more he realized that Evan had a history of exploiting people for his own gain. It was becoming clear that Evan had seen Alex as a pawn in his own power game, and Ryan's family had been collateral damage. But what bothered Ryan the most was that Evan was still very much active in the business world. Despite the years that had passed, Evan remained a powerful figure, quietly influencing deals from behind the scenes. Ryan knew that if Evan had been capable of manipulating Alex back then, there was no telling what else he had done, or was still doing. Determined to get answers, Ryan decided to confront Evan directly. He knew it was risky, but he couldn't let this man continue to hide in the shadows. If Evan had played a role in tearing his family apart, Ryan needed to know why, and he needed to make sure Evan never hurt anyone else the way he had hurt them. Through his research, Ryan found out that Evan was attending a high-profile business conference in New York. It was the perfect opportunity to confront him face to face. Ryan secured a ticket to the event, knowing that once he was inside, he would have to tread carefully. Evan was powerful, and Ryan couldn't afford to underestimate him. The day of the conference arrived, and Ryan made his way to the venue. The atmosphere was polished and professional, filled with corporate executives, entrepreneurs, and investors. As Ryan entered the grand ballroom, he scanned the crowd, his eyes searching for Evan. He spotted him almost immediately. Evan was seated at a table near the front, casually chatting with a group of influential figures. Ryan's heart raced as he approached, the adrenaline pumping through his veins. This was the man who had helped destroy his family, the man who had pushed Alex to abandon him and Chloe. Ryan had no idea how Evan would react to his sudden appearance, but he was ready for whatever came next. As Ryan reached Evan's table, he cleared his throat, catching the older man's attention. Evan looked up, his expression curious but composed. Can I help you?" Evan asked, his voice smooth and confident. Ryan felt a surge of anger rise in his chest, but he kept his tone steady. "I'm Ryan Graham, Alex Graham's son." Evan's expression barely flickered, but Ryan noticed a subtle shift in his posture, a tightening of his shoulders, a slight narrowing of his eyes. Evan took a moment before responding, his voice carefully measured. "Ah, Alex's son, I see. What brings you here, Ryan?" Ryan leaned in slightly, his voice low but firm. "I think you know exactly why I'm here. I know about you and my father. I know how you manipulated him, how you convinced him to walk away from his family." Evan's expression remained calm, but there was an unmistakable edge to his voice as he replied, "Manipulated. That's a strong word, Ryan. Your father made his own decisions. I simply provided him with the opportunities he needed to succeed." "Opportunities?" Ryan scoffed, his anger bubbling to the surface. "You convinced him to abandon us, to walk away from his responsibilities. You destroyed my family for your own gain." Evan's eyes darkened, but he remained composed. "I didn't destroy anything, Ryan. Your father was a grown man. He knew what he was doing when he chose to prioritize his career. I might have helped him see what was necessary, but the choice was always his." Ryan felt a surge of frustration. Evan was deflecting, refusing to take responsibility for the role he had played in Alex's downfall. But Ryan wasn't going to let him off the hook that easily. "You took advantage of him," Ryan said, his voice rising. "You used his ambition against him, made him think that cutting us out of his life was the only way to succeed. You manipulated him because you knew you could." Evan's expression shifted slightly, a flicker of annoyance crossing his face. "Your father wanted success, Ryan. He wanted to be at the top, and he was willing to make sacrifices to get there. If you're looking for someone to blame, look at him. I didn't force him to do anything." Ryan clenched his fists, his anger threatening to boil over. "You used him," Ryan said, his voice sharp. "And you don't even care, do you? You ruined people's lives, and you don't feel a thing." Evan leaned back in his chair, his eyes cold and calculating. "You're young, Ryan. You don't understand how the world works yet. People make choices, and they live with the consequences. Your father made his choices, and now you have to decide how you're going to live with them." Ryan stared at him, disgusted by the man's lack of remorse. He had hoped for some kind of admission, some acknowledgement of the pain Evan had caused, but it was clear that Evan saw none of it. To him, Alex's downfall and the destruction of Ryan's family was just another business transaction, another move in a game of power. "I'm not going to let you get away with this," Ryan said, his voice trembling with anger. "You might think you're untouchable, but I'm going to make sure people know who you really are." Evan's smile was cold, almost mocking. "Good luck with that, Ryan. I've been in this game a long time. People like me don't go down easily." Ryan felt a wave of frustration wash over him. Evan was right about one thing. He was powerful, and taking him down wouldn't be easy. But Ryan wasn't going to back down. He couldn't, not after everything that had happened. Without another word, Ryan turned and walked away, his heart pounding. The confrontation hadn't gone the way he had expected, but at least he had stood up to the man who had played such a destructive role in his family's history. And now, more than ever, Ryan knew that he couldn't let this go. When Ryan returned home later that night, he found Chloe waiting for him. She could sense the tension in his body as soon as he walked through the door. "Are you okay?" Chloe asked gently, her eyes filled with concern. Ryan nodded, though his mind was still reeling from the confrontation with Evan. "I confronted Evan Palmer today," he said, his voice steady but strained. Chloe's eyes widened in surprise. "You did? What happened?" Ryan sat down beside her, running a hand through his hair as he recounted the conversation. He didn't deny anything, but he's not sorry either. To him, it was all just business. Chloe shook her head, a mix of anger and sadness crossing her face. "I knew he was a terrible person, but to hear him talk about it like that, it's sickening." "I don't know what to do now," Ryan admitted. "I want to make sure people know what he's done, but he's so powerful, I don't know if I can take him down." Chloe placed a hand on Ryan's arm, her voice soft but determined. "You don't have to do this alone, Ryan. We'll figure it out together." Ryan looked at his mother, feeling the weight of her support. For the first time in a long time, he didn't feel completely lost. He had uncovered a painful truth about his family's past, but he wasn't going to let that truth define him. With Chloe by his side, Ryan knew he could face whatever came next. After the confrontation with Evan Palmer, Ryan felt a mix of anger and exhaustion. His emotions were like a storm inside him, pulling him in different directions. On one hand, he wanted to take Evan down, expose him for the manipulative and heartless man he was. But on the other hand, Ryan knew the difficulty of such a task. Evan was powerful, entrenched in the business world with connections and influence that Ryan could barely fathom. Going after him wouldn't just be a fight, it would be a war. As the days passed, Ryan spent more time reflecting on everything that had come to light. The discovery of Evan's role in his father's decision to abandon him and Chloe had shifted Ryan's perspective, but it hadn't absolved Alex of his choices. Ryan still struggled to understand why Alex had allowed himself to be manipulated, why he had prioritized his career over his family, and why he had stayed away for so long. But something had changed in Ryan as well. For the first time, he wasn't just reacting to the pain of the past. He was starting to think about the future, about what kind of man he wanted to be, and what kind of relationship, if any, he wanted with his father. He had confronted the ghosts of his past. But now, he had to decide how to move forward. One evening, as Ryan sat on the balcony of his apartment, looking out over the city, Chloe joined him. She'd been giving him space, letting him process everything in his own time, but Ryan could see the concern in her eyes. "You've been quiet lately," Chloe said gently, taking a seat beside him. "Are you okay?" Ryan sighed, leaning back in his chair. "I don't know. There's just so much to think about. I'm trying to figure out what to do about everything." Chloe nodded, understanding the weight of the decisions Ryan was facing. "I know it's a lot, Ryan, and I don't have the answers for you, but whatever you decide, I'll support you." Ryan turned to look at her, the woman who had sacrificed everything to raise him, who had been his rock through all the uncertainty and pain. "I just don't know what to do about Alex," Ryan admitted. "I've spent my whole life angry at him, hating him for leaving us. But now, after learning about Evan, it's not as simple as I thought." Chloe's face softened, and she placed a hand on Ryan's arm. "It's never been simple, Ryan. Your father made terrible mistakes, but people are complicated. He was weak, and he let someone like Evan influence him. That doesn't excuse what he did, but maybe it helps explain it." Ryan nodded, though his heart still felt heavy. "I just don't know if I can forgive him. Even now, after everything I've learned, I don't know if I can ever fully trust him again." Chloe was quiet for a moment before speaking. "You don't have to forgive him, Ryan. Not right away. Forgiveness isn't something you can force. It has to come on its own, and if it never does, that's okay too. But whatever you decide, it has to be about what's best for you, not about what you think you should do." Ryan appreciated her words, but the decision still weighed heavily on him. He had uncovered the truth about his family's past, but the future remained uncertain. How could he move forward with Alex after everything that had happened? And yet, how could he completely shut the door on the possibility of healing? The next morning, Ryan decided it was time to talk to Alex again. They had been in contact sporadically since the confrontation with Evan, but Ryan had been keeping his distance, unsure of how to proceed. Now, he was ready to face his father once more. Ryan texted Alex and asked him to meet at a small park near Ryan's apartment, away from the distractions of the city. It was a quiet spot, surrounded by trees and open space, the kind of place where they could talk without interruptions. When Alex arrived, he looked anxious but hopeful. Ryan could see the tension in his father's face, the way Alex seemed to be holding his breath, waiting for whatever was about to come. "Thanks for meeting me," Ryan said, trying to keep his tone calm. "Of course," Alex replied, his voice steady but cautious. "I wasn't sure if you were ready to talk." Ryan sat down on a bench, motioning for Alex to join him. "I've been thinking a lot," Ryan began, choosing his words carefully. "About everything. About you. About Evan. About what happened between you and Mom." Alex nodded, his expression serious. "I know it's a lot to process, and I know I've put you in an impossible situation with everything that's come to light." Ryan looked down at his hands, his thoughts swirling. "I confronted Evan," he said quietly. Alex's eyes widened in surprise. "You did? What did he say?" Ryan clenched his fists, remembering the cold, calculating way Evan had brushed off the damage he had caused. He didn't deny anything. He admitted to manipulating you, but he didn't care. To him, it was just business. Alex's face tightened, and he let out a long, slow breath. "That sounds like Evan," he said bitterly. "He's always been ruthless. But that doesn't change the fact that I let him manipulate me. I let my ambition cloud my judgment, and I abandoned you and Chloe because of it. That's on me, Ryan." Ryan appreciated Alex's honesty, but the pain of the past still lingered. "You hurt us," Ryan said, his voice filled with emotion. "I grew up without a father because of the choices you made. Mum sacrificed everything to raise me, and you weren't there." "I know," Alex said softly, his voice filled with regret. "And I'll never be able to make up for that, but I want to try. I want to be part of your life now, if you'll let me." Ryan looked at his father, seeing the guilt and the desperation in his eyes. For the first time, Ryan understood the weight Alex had been carrying all these years, the burden of his mistakes, the regret that had haunted him. But that didn't erase the damage that had been done. "I'm not sure if I can ever forgive you," Ryan admitted, his voice shaking slightly. "I don't know if I'll ever fully trust you again." Alex nodded, his face filled with sorrow. "I understand, and I won't push you for forgiveness. All I'm asking for is the chance to be in your life, to prove that I'm not the man I used to be." Ryan sat in silence for a long moment, weighing his father's words. He wasn't ready to forgive Alex, but he also wasn't ready to shut the door completely. There was a part of him that still wanted to believe that people could change, that maybe with time there could be healing. "I'll give you that chance," Ryan said finally, his voice steady but cautious. "But it's going to take time, a lot of time." Alex nodded, relief washing over his face. "Thank you, Ryan. I won't let you down." Ryan stood up, feeling a strange sense of calm despite the uncertainty of what lay ahead. He wasn't sure what the future would look like, but for the first time in a long time, he felt like he was taking control of his own story. He had faced the pain of the past, confronted the people who had hurt him, and now he was ready to start building something new. As he walked away from the park, Ryan realized that the journey wasn't over. There would be challenges ahead, moments of doubt, moments of anger, moments of sadness, but he was no longer defined by the choices Alex had made. This was his life, his story, and he was finally ready to write the next chapter on his own terms. In the weeks following Ryan's cautious decision to let Alex back into his life, things remained fragile. Every interaction between them was marked by a delicate balance of tension and hope, as father and son navigated the complexities of rebuilding their relationship. Ryan still carried the weight of Alex's betrayal, but there was a small part of him that wanted to believe in the possibility of change, in the idea that time could heal old wounds. Chloe, on the other hand, had distanced herself from Alex. Though she supported Ryan's decision, she couldn't bring herself to engage with the man who had caused so much pain. Her focus remained on her son, as it always had. But even as she gave Ryan the space to explore this new chapter with Alex, she worried about the consequences. What if Alex hurt him again? What if Ryan was opening himself up to more heartache? Despite these concerns, Ryan continued to meet with Alex, testing the waters of their relationship. Alex was careful, never pushing too hard, always mindful of Ryan's boundaries. It wasn't the perfect reconciliation, but it was a start. But just as things began to stabilize, something happened that threw everything into chaos. One afternoon, while at work, Ryan received an unexpected call. The number was unfamiliar, but he answered it anyway, assuming it was related to one of his cases. "Hello? Ryan Graham?" The voice on the other end was calm but serious. "Yes, this is Ryan," he replied, his curiosity piqued. "Who's this?" "My name is Simon Clark. I'm an attorney. I represent Evan Palmer." Ryan's heart skipped a beat at the mention of Evan's name. After their confrontation at the business conference, Ryan had thought he was done with Evan, but now, hearing his name again sent a surge of adrenaline through him. "What do you want?" Ryan asked, his tone cold. Simon paused for a moment before continuing. "Mr. Palmer is preparing to file a defamation lawsuit against you. He claims that your recent actions have damaged his reputation and interfered with his business." Ryan's stomach dropped. "Defamation? Are you kidding me?" "I assure you, Mr. Palmer is quite serious," Simon replied, his voice calm and professional. "He has evidence that you have been spreading false information about him to several of his business associates, and he intends to take legal action unless you agree to settle this matter privately." Ryan's mind raced. He hadn't spread any lies about Evan, but he had been digging into his past, trying to expose the truth about his role in Alex's decisions. Could Evan be trying to silence him before Ryan uncovered something more damaging? "I haven't said anything that isn't true," Ryan said firmly. "If Evan wants to sue me, he's going to have to prove that I defamed him, and he can't." There was a pause on the other end of the line, and when Simon spoke again, his tone was more measured. "We can avoid a public lawsuit, Mr. Graham. Mr. Palmer is willing to settle this quietly if you agree to back off. He simply wants to protect his reputation." "This doesn't have to get messy." Ryan clenched his jaw, his anger rising. This was exactly the kind of manipulation he had come to expect from Evan, a man who used his power and influence to bend people to his will. But Ryan wasn't going to be intimidated. "I'm not backing off," Ryan said, his voice steely. "If Evan wants to take this to court, I'll be ready. But he should know that I'm not afraid of him." There was a long silence on the other end of the line before Simon spoke again. "Very well. You'll be hearing from us soon." The call ended, and Ryan sat back in his chair, his mind spinning. Evan was trying to silence him, to use the legal system to protect himself from the consequences of his actions. But Ryan wasn't going to let that happen. He had come too far, uncovered too much, to back down now. That evening, Ryan met with Alex, needing to tell him about the lawsuit. They sat in a small cafe, the tension between them palpable as Ryan explained what had happened. "Evan's suing me for defamation," Ryan said, his voice tight with frustration. "He's trying to scare me into backing off, but I'm not going to let him get away with it." Alex's face darkened, and he leaned forward, his expression serious. "I knew Evan was ruthless, but I didn't think he'd go this far. He's trying to protect himself, Ryan. He knows that if you keep digging, you'll find something that could destroy him. I don't understand why he's so desperate," Ryan said, shaking his head. "What is he hiding? Why does he care so much about what I find?" Alex hesitated for a moment, as if weighing whether to say what he was about to say. Finally, he spoke, his voice low. "Evan has always been willing to do whatever it takes to protect his empire. When we were working together, I saw things that made me question how far he'd go to keep his power. He's dangerous, Ryan. You need to be careful." Ryan looked at his father, the man who had once been manipulated by Evan, and felt a surge of determination. "I'm not afraid of him," Ryan said, his voice steady. "I'm going to fight this. I'll take him to court if I have to, but I'm not going to let him silence me." Alex nodded, his eyes filled with a mix of pride and concern. "I'll support you in whatever you decide, Ryan. But just know that Evan doesn't play fair. He'll use every trick he has to win." Ryan leaned back in his chair, the weight of the situation pressing down on him. He knew this was a fight he couldn't take lightly, but he also knew that backing down wasn't an option. Evan had manipulated his father, torn his family apart, and now he was trying to use his power to silence Ryan. But Ryan wasn't going to let him. Over the next few weeks, Ryan prepared for the legal battle ahead. He worked closely with his own attorney, gathering evidence and building his case against Evan. It wasn't easy. Evan was a master at covering his tracks, and finding concrete proof of his wrongdoing was like chasing shadows. But Ryan was relentless, determined to expose the truth, no matter how long it took. As the court date approached, Ryan felt the pressure mounting. This wasn't just a fight for justice, it was personal. He was fighting not only for himself, but for Chloe and Alex, for the family that had been shattered by Evan's manipulations. On the morning of the trial, Ryan stood outside the courthouse, his heart pounding in his chest. Alex stood beside him, offering quiet support, while Chloe had chosen to stay home, unable to face the man who had played such a destructive role in their lives. Ryan took a deep breath, steeling himself for the battle ahead. He knew that Evan would come prepared, that he would use every tactic at his disposal to win. But Ryan had something that Evan didn't, truth on his side. As the doors to the courtroom opened and Ryan stepped inside, he felt a sense of calm wash over him. This was it, the moment he had been preparing for, the moment he would finally confront the man who had caused so much pain. And this time, Ryan wouldn't be silenced. The tension in the courtroom was palpable as Ryan sat at the plaintiff's table, his mind racing with 1,000 thoughts. Across the room, Evan Palmer sat, exuding a quiet confidence that only made Ryan more determined to see this through. This wasn't just about the lawsuit, it was about exposing the truth, confronting the man who had manipulated his father and, by extension, destroyed his family. Ryan's attorney, Michael Reed, stood beside him, reviewing the final notes before the trial began. Michael had been a solid ally throughout the process. helping Ryan navigate the complexities of the legal system and guiding him on how best to present his case. Ryan knew that this was his moment, the culmination of everything he had fought for over the past months. The judge entered the room and the proceedings began. Evan's lawyer opened with a calm, calculated statement, painting Ryan as an angry son who had let his personal vendetta against Evan cloud his judgment. He argued that Ryan had spread false and damaging information about Evan's business dealings, all without proof. The defense was relying on Ryan's inability to provide concrete evidence to support his claims. But Ryan wasn't going to let that narrative stand. When it was time for Ryan's attorney to present his case, Michael stood confidently, outlining the facts that had been uncovered during their investigation. It wasn't easy. Evan had been meticulous about covering his tracks, but they had found enough to raise serious questions about his business practices and his manipulations of Alex Graham years ago. Ryan watched as witness after witness took the stand. Many of them former associates of Evan who, though reluctant, corroborated the idea that Evan had often used underhanded tactics to get what he wanted. While some of the evidence was circumstantial, the pattern of manipulation and unethical behavior was clear. Finally, it was time for Ryan to take the stand. He had been preparing for this moment for weeks, but now that it was here, his heart raced with anxiety. This wasn't just about telling the court what had happened. It was about telling his story, the story of a family torn apart by greed, ambition, and betrayal. As he sat in the witness box, the courtroom fell silent. All eyes were on him. Ryan took a deep breath and began, "Growing up, I didn't know why my father had left. I thought it was because he didn't care, that he had chosen his career over his family. But recently, I learned that there was more to the story. My father was manipulated by Evan Palmer, who convinced him that walking away from us was the only way to succeed. It wasn't just about ambition, it was about power. Evan used my father's vulnerability against him, and in doing so, he destroyed our family." Ryan's voice trembled slightly as he spoke, but he kept his emotions in check. He detailed the impact Alex's absence had had on his life, how Chloe had been left to raise him alone, and how the discovery of Evan's involvement had reopened old wounds. But most importantly, he explained how Evan had used his influence to manipulate people like Alex, turning them into pawns in his larger game of power. When Evan's attorney cross-examined Ryan, he tried to paint him as a bitter son seeking revenge. But Ryan stood firm. "I'm not here out of bitterness," he said, his voice steady. "I'm here because the truth needs to be told. Evan Palmer has hurt too many people, and he needs to be held accountable." As the trial progressed, the defense continued to argue that Ryan had no solid proof of defamation. But as more witnesses spoke out, it became increasingly clear that Evan had a long history of unethical behavior, one that had affected many people beyond just Alex and Ryan. The trial stretched over several days, each one filled with tense exchanges between the attorneys and the witnesses. Ryan's resolve never wavered, even as Evan's legal team tried to discredit him at every turn. He knew that this fight wasn't just about winning a lawsuit, it was about standing up for his family and making sure that Evan could no longer hurt anyone else. On the final day of the trial, the courtroom was filled with a quiet sense of anticipation. The closing arguments had been made, and now everyone waited for the judge's decision. Ryan sat at the plaintiff's table, his heart pounding in his chest, while Evan sat across the room, his expression unreadable. The judge entered the room, and everyone rose. After what felt like an eternity, the judge began to read his decision. After reviewing the evidence and hearing the testimony, it is clear that while the plaintiff, Ryan Graham, may not have provided direct proof of defamation, there is sufficient evidence to suggest that Mr. Palmer's actions have caused significant harm to the plaintiff and his family. The court finds that Mr. Palmer has engaged in unethical business practices and has manipulated individuals for his own gain. As such, I am ruling in favor of the plaintiff. Ryan's breath caught in his throat. He had won. It wasn't just about the lawsuit, it was about finally getting justice for everything that had happened. He felt a wave of relief wash over him as the weight of the past seemed to lift from his shoulders. Evan's face remained stoic, but Ryan could see the tension in his jaw, the frustration simmering just beneath the surface. For the first time, Evan Palmer had been held accountable for his actions. Later that evening, Ryan and Alex met up at a quiet bar to reflect on everything that had happened. Alex looked at his son with a mixture of pride and gratitude, clearly moved by the way Ryan had fought for their family. "I'm proud of you," Alex said, his voice filled with emotion. "You stood up to him. You did what I couldn't." Ryan looked at his father, feeling a strange mix of emotions. This trial had brought them closer together, but it hadn't erased the years of pain and betrayal. There was still a long way to go before their relationship could truly heal, but Ryan knew that they were on the right path. "I did it for us," Ryan said quietly. "For me, for Mom, and for you. We deserved better than what Evan did to us." Alex nodded, his eyes filled with regret. "I know I can't change the past, but I'm grateful for this second chance with you, Ryan. I won't take it for granted." Ryan smiled faintly, feeling a sense of closure that had eluded him for so long. The journey hadn't been easy, and there were still scars that would never fully heal. But for the first time in his life, Ryan felt like he had taken control of his own story. As he left the bar that night, walking through the quiet streets of New York, Ryan felt a sense of peace. He had confronted the demons of his past, faced the man who had caused so much destruction, and emerged stronger for it. His family's story had been marked by pain and betrayal, but now, finally, there was hope for the future. And for Ryan, that was enough. I hope you enjoyed today's story. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more stories like this. Leave a like and comment below what you thought of the story. See you in the next video.